Welcome back to Only Talk Sports, and tonight we have a fun show, folks, because we're going to be talking about NBA free agency. And every single year, there's always a lot of crazy moves that are made during NBA free agency, players going to new teams. There's always a lot of stuff to talk about, but this year, it feels like there's even more than usual because there are so many great players that have already, in just 2 days of NBA free agency, they have moved on to a new team, and it's going to make a big difference in the NBA next season. There's going to be a lot of shakeups because of these moves. Obviously, we know that Paul George is leaving the Los Angeles Clippers to go off to the Philadelphia 76ers on a massive 4-year, $212 million deal. I made a video on that earlier, but there's so much going on right now with NBA free agency that I can't make a video on everything. I can't make a short on everything. I've tried to keep up, but there's just so much to get into. That's why we're hosting this live stream tonight, and I'm going to have call-ins later on in the show where you guys can come in and discuss NBA free agency with me if you would like to. It should be a lot of fun. Can't wait to get into all of it, but should be going live for probably about an hour, hour and a half, because it is kind of late, 11 o'clock on the East Coast. If you're out west, it's not too late, but we do got a lot to get into, and I'm sure there's going to be more free agency moves that are going to make a big impact in the coming days. But still, these first 2 days have had a load full of moves. They're just so consequential. And it's not even about just the players that have moved on to different teams. It's also even the players that have stayed on the same team, but they're getting massive extensions, massive contract extensions, including the biggest contract in NBA history with Jason Tatum getting re-signed at the Boston Celtics. The Boston Celtics, they're keeping the team in town. They're keeping the band together. But unfortunately, though, the Boston Celtics are paying a hefty price for all those players. But we're going to get all into all this and more. But to start out with, though, Klay Thompson is the newest addition, the newest move that has been made in NBA free agency. And I have not been able to make a video on it, except I did make a video on possibly going to another team. I did say that I do think that Klay Thompson is going to leave. Everybody else was in agreement, even though a few days ago, people were still kind of 50-50 because it's Klay Thompson. He's a splash brother. He wasn't going to leave Golden State, but he ended up leaving, which is absolutely crazy. I can't believe Klay Thompson actually bit the bullet and decided to go to a different team. And I don't blame him actually for doing it in a way because of the fact that he's going to be making more money with the Dallas Mavericks than what Golden State was going to end up wanting to pay him. And that ultimately sealed the deal for why Klay Thompson ended up moving on from the Golden State Warriors and ending the dynasty that had been Klay Thompson, Stephon Curry, and Draymond Green that had been at Golden State for over a decade. It's sad to see because you talk about the fact that dynasties are basically ending in the fact that players are not staying on the same team for their whole career anymore. The Dirk Nowitzkis, guys like him staying at the Dallas Mavericks his entire career and Dallas never getting rid of him, and he took pay cuts toward the end of his career so he wouldn't have to basically be a player anymore. Obviously, there's just no way that you're not going to be at the level that you were earlier in your career. And that's what ended up happening to Dirk Nowitzki. He was a fantastic player in his prime, but toward the end, he just wasn't as good anymore. He was aging out and he ended up retiring, but still he retired with the Mavericks, the team that drafted him. And that's what you're not going to be seeing anymore. Even with Curry, it's going to be very interesting. Will Stephon Curry stay his whole career at the Golden State Warriors? If Klay Thompson's any precedent, maybe at the very tail end of Curry's career, he'll end up moving on to another team, but maybe he'll be a player that he'll end up maybe taking a pay cut, or he'll just retire and say, I'm done. I'm not going to go to another team and have to go with the whole rigmarole of going to tons of different teams. And usually every subsequent team that you get traded to, you end up usually getting traded to a worse team. So definitely sometimes it's just best to go out while you're still really good and you're still on top instead of having to go to a bunch of different teams and you're really not even getting to play all that much anyway because you're just not as good as you used to be. But Klay Thompson, though, leaving the Golden State Warriors to go to the Dallas Mavericks. And according to Wojnarowski at ESPN, that's not too bad. That's not too expensive, right? I mean, $50 million over 3 years, that's kind of around a little over $15 million per year. So that's not taking up too much of their cap space, and they're still able to pay Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, who are obviously going to be the two best players on the team. Klay Thompson is going to be the third option, unless you even want to say it's PJ Washington, and then it will be Klay Thompson. But probably will be Klay Thompson will be the third option over PJ Washington. But I think it's a good move for Dallas because, yes, they needed to beef up their team a little bit more. We saw how good they were this past season, but once they got to the end, once they had to face the Boston Celtics, who ended up finally proving to everybody that Tatum and Brown could win an NBA title this season in 2024, the Mavericks just couldn't beat them. They couldn't get it done. They were very close, very good team. I was really shocked that they actually made it all the way because I even thought with the moves that they made to get Daniel Gafford and they drafted Derek Lively, and then they also away, but Denver beat Minnesota. So as you can see, the Dallas Mavericks were able to end up getting all the way to the finals, but they still fell short. And I do believe, in my opinion, that when you're looking at the Dallas Mavericks, adding a player like Klay Thompson might be just enough, possibly, to get them over the hump and be able to win an NBA title. I mean, would I bet on that? I don't bet anyway, but probably not. They're still, in my opinion, better all-around teams in the NBA right now, but the Dallas Mavericks are among that group at the top of the NBA, and adding Klay Thompson's a good move, and he's not going to a bad team like some other older veterans when they end up going to another team end up going to. He's actually going to a better team, actually, because of the fact that the Golden State Warriors, the dynasty is over, and unless they had, a great trade up their sleeve and they were able to have Klay Thompson take a really big pay cut, they really weren't going to ever be better again with the same group of guys. I mean, they're past their prime. It is what it is. It's sad to see, but unfortunately, it just had to be what it had to be. And now he's going off to the Dallas Mavericks, which is going to be a better team for him. So I think it's a good move for Klay Thompson. I just think it stinks in general, though, seeing, unfortunately, the dynasty of Klay Thompson, Stephon Curry, Draymond Green, and particularly just the two Splash Brothers. And that's just watching them for almost 15 years. And I think it's going to show a sign in the NBA in future seasons that you're probably not going to be seeing guys stick around on the same team for forever and a week. You're just not going to see that anymore. But I think at the end of the day, it was really good for Klay Thompson to move, and it's a very good addition for the Dallas Mavericks. But then you talk about Paul George to the Philadelphia 76ers, and this is a whole different situation because I've already made a video on it, like I said earlier, but I will say, and when you talk about Paul George, he is a guy that is older like Klay Thompson. He's 34 years old, but he's better than Klay Thompson currently is. Paul George is still a guy that can average over 20 points per game in a season because he just did it this past season at the Clippers. He averaged 23 points, so he's still good, even though he is 34 years old. But the problem is that Paul George is a guy that is aging fast, and he's probably in each Thompson just took a 3-year, $50 million deal. Paul George just took a 4-year, $212 million deal. That is a ridiculous amount, $212 million in 4 years. A lot of people paying the OG Anunoby extension with the New York Knicks because he's getting like a 5-year, $212 million deal. It's like the exact same amount of money, but OG Anunoby's a younger guy. He averaged like 15 points per game this past season. Plus, he's one of the best defenders in the NBA, and the Knicks do have aspirations to win it all, so they had to keep him. I think that was a decent move for the Knicks to keep him because of the fact that he's that good of a player, but to pay him that much, that is a bit steep, and we'll see if it ends up working out for the Knicks in the long run. But then when you talk about Paul George, 76ers have Tyrese Maxey, who you can see right there is getting an extension as well. Tyrese Maxey getting a 5-year, $204 million extension. Paul George getting a 4-year, $212 million deal with the 76ers. And then they have Joel Embiid, who they're paying a lot of money. I don't know. I feel like this Paul George is a great player. And even though he's getting older, he's still really good. But I don't know if this was the right move for the 76ers. I think they needed to get a young star. I know it is hard to do so because of the fact that we saw, like with the Clippers, trading Shai Gilgeous-Alexander to the Thunder to get Paul George. That ended up backfiring. They could have had SGA all this time at the Clippers, but instead gave him to the Thunder, and look at the player he's become. And he's got a decade left of great basketball left. Whereas Paul George, in 5 years, he probably won't even be in the NBA anymore in 5 or 6 years. So I don't know. I think that it is good to trade for younger guys or draft younger guys, but it's harder to get those guys because teams aren't going to be as willing to give them up because of the fact that you talk about guys like SGA and these other players, Tyrese Maxey. I mean, you don't want to get rid of these guys. You don't want to give them up. I mean, the 76ers could have let Maxey go, but he's their future. Joel Embiid isn't even really their future almost at this point because he's 30. He's got more years left, way more than Paul George, but the future for the 76ers is going to be with Tyrese Maxey. So they need to find a way to get younger, and adding a guy like Paul George, that isn't really helping. So we got Jackson here. He says, what's up, Only Talk Sports Nation? Appreciate you for being here, Jackson. RC is in the building. He says, yo, Only Talk Sports. Appreciate you for stopping by. And you say that Paul George has 2 good years left, maybe. Laughing out loud. Earlier about Paul George. He only has, in my opinion, 2 really good years left. And the 76ers just signed him to a 4-year deal. The Clippers didn't want to do it. Clippers decided to give Kawhi Leonard that 4-year deal, and they re-signed James Harden. But Paul George, they're like, okay, we might give you a 3-year deal, but they're not going to give him a 4-year deal. And to me, that was smart of the Clippers because why in the world are you going to sign a 34-year-old guy to a 4-year deal worth that much? So the Clippers made the right move. 76ers, I don't think that it's the worst move in the world for the first couple years, but when Paul George is 37 years old and if he's still under contract with the 76ers, I just don't know. To me, bad move in a way for the 76ers. It might start out okay, and if somehow the 76ers can win a title with Paul George, Joel Embiid, and Tyrese Maxey, then it will end up being a good trade. But I don't see it happening because the problem is that Paul George is injury prone. And definitely Joel Embiid is injury prone. We saw with the Clippers with Kawhi Leonard, and then we saw with Paul George, both those guys, they just could not stay healthy at the same time, so they didn't get to advance in the playoffs. And if that's what happens with the 76ers, then you can kiss their chances of going far goodbye. We got Hummus Hero in the chat. Hey, Jeffrey and everyone, appreciate you for stopping by, Hummus Hero. And then RC says, Only Talk Sports, you know what the PG move was about, right? It was the Embiid, please stay, we were trying, don't leave us for the Lakers or Heat or whatever. You're absolutely right, RC. That's exactly what it is. But the issue is that Embiid's going to realize that probably, again, in around 2 years or so, and if the 76ers haven't won what they're wanting to win, which is a title like every other team wants to do, then Embiid's going to realize this was a terrible move. Because Paul George, once he starts to decline, he's not going to be nowhere near worth the amount of money that the 76ers are going to be paying him per year, and then that's when the trade's going to become bad. Jackson said as well, Paul George can't win the big game. That's a good point. I mean, I think Paul George is a really good player, and sometimes you can't really blame like your failures in the playoffs on one guy. I mean, your teammates have to help you out as well. I mean, people were showing that Kyrie Irving was like 14-0 in elimination games or whatever. I think it was actually like clinching games or whatever. Like, you know, if they're up like 3-2 in the playoffs and in a win and you advance or whatever, playoff clinching scenarios, that's what Kyrie Irving was. And it's like, well, his teammates had to help him win too. It's not like he's scoring all the points. It's still impressive that Irving was that good, but then you end up seeing that Irving wasn't able to do it this time with, you know, some of the playoff games that they were in. They weren't able to, in elimination games, get the win. So I don't know. Like, your teammates have to help you out, but I do think there is something to be said, you know, with Paul George not really having a lot of success in the playoffs or being able to win, you know, certain type of games like that. That is interesting. I mean, maybe he just isn't as clutch as some other stars are. Hummus Hero says, yeah, that $212 million is basically max money. I don't know about 4 years. Yeah. I mean, if this was like a 2-year deal, then it'd be fine. But see, the Clippers probably would have signed him for that. He wanted a bigger deal. Paul George was stubborn and he wanted a 4-year deal. And I mean, you can't blame him. I mean, kind of like I said in my video earlier, if you guys didn't see it with Paul George, I said that, yeah, it's great for Paul George. This is fantastic for Paul George. Whether he wins a title or not with the 76ers, getting a 4-year, $212 million deal at 34 years of age, absolutely unreal. But it's probably a bad move for the 76ers at the end of the day. And the 76ers, they're making a lot of moves because they also signed Kelly Oubre to a 2-year, $16.3 million deal. So that's a lot of money that they're throwing around Definitely Kelly Oubre is not as important as Maxey and George, but still going to be a significant, part of their team. Then you also have Aaron Wiggins and the Thunder agreed to a 5-year, $47 million extension. I mean, the Thunder, they're signing people to new deals. They did the same thing with Isaiah Joe. They want to win. They want to continue to improve. And I think that overall, Hummer says if Klay can return anywhere, if you were in here, Humasiro, when I was talking about Klay Thompson at the beginning, but what I said is that I agree absolutely. He could be that missing piece. He could be what helps them get over the hump and be able to win a title. It's very well possible. And they didn't sign him to a ridiculous deal either. So it's definitely a much better move for the Mavericks to sign Klay than it was for the 76ers to get Paul George. RC says, well, George is better than Tobias Harris, laughing out loud. That's true. I actually forgot to mention that earlier about how Tobias Harris is moving on from the 76ers. I didn't even say that in the video earlier, but yeah, Paul George is better than Tobias Harris, but Tobias Harris also wasn't demanding nowhere near as much money. So, I mean, you take the good with the bad. Yes, Paul George is better, but, I mean, if you look at points per game, Tobias Harris averaged 17 points per game this past season, whereas Paul George averaged 23. So, you're going from a guy that's getting like $15 million a year. Now you're paying a guy like $50 million a year or whatever, only for 6 more points. I mean, is that really that significant? Yes, Paul George is more athletic. He's more dynamic. He can do more on the floor than Tobias Harris, but was it really worth it? I don't think so. 6 more points per game is not worth, in my opinion, like a $30 million per year difference. Absolutely not. That's outrageous. But the 76ers, they're the ones making the moves, not me. But there it is right there. Tobias Harris got a 2-year, $52 million deal per Wojnarowski at ESPN. And that's good for him. I mean, that's a lot more than he was making at the 76ers. The only issue is that Tobias Harris, I mean, he's an older guy too. And obviously, I mean, for him, I mean, he's just like excited to get, another good contract before like he ages out too. I mean, it's a good contract. Getting $25 million a year for a guy that, no one really, I mean, he's one of probably the better players in the NBA that hardly anybody talk about. I mean, he's a good player. He's fine. I mean, he does everything, you want a guy like, a player of his type to do. But when you talk about like, guys around the NBA, like more people are going to mention OG Anunoby than Tobias Harris. Even though Tobias Harris averaged more points this past season, it is what it is. It's just certain teams that you're on or your play style, or maybe like even Draymond. Draymond averages a lot less than a lot of stars in the league, but he gets talked about because he's Draymond Green. I mean, he's always in the news. So it's almost like an image thing. But it's good for Tobias Harris to get money, but he's going to be on a horrible team these next 2 years with the Pistons. Looking further down, Derek White, obviously a part of the Celtics, basically re-signing everybody. Derek White getting a 4-year, $125 million deal. I mean, he deserves it. I mean, he's been playing fantastic. He deserves to get that money. I just don't know how the Celtics are going to be paying all these guys. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum getting the biggest, the contract in the NBA. How are they paying all these guys? I have no idea. That's an astronomical amount of money. I mean, Derek White is the third option getting $125 million, and then you got Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum making like over, the 4 or 5 year deals or whatever, like 250 and 300 million. It's insane. That's a lot of money. And obviously they're keeping, Holiday and Kristaps. So definitely, I mean, they're over the luxury tax, but I mean, they want to win again. Can't blame them. And maybe they'll be able to do it. I mean, there it is. Jason Tatum. Absolutely insane. I mean, Jaylen Brown got the biggest contract in the NBA. Now Tatum usurped it. That's why it was making me laugh so much. And people were like, oh my goodness, I can't believe Jaylen Brown's making more than Tatum. And I'm like, give it time. Give it time. Tatum's going to end up getting a bigger contract than Jaylen Brown. There you go. Kind of like when Kirby Smart got a bigger contract than Nick Saban in college football. And people were like, oh my goodness, I can't believe Kirby's making more. And then Nick Saban, they gave him a bigger contract at Alabama to be worth more than Kirby Smart. Even though Nick Saban ended up retiring anyway, and he didn't even live out that contract. He didn't, all that. So it's just funny. Like, it's just sometimes it's a money game. Like, you just want to pass the other. RC says if the best the Bucks can do is DeLon Wright in free agency, they might as well not even report the training camp. Yeah, I saw that right there. 1 year, $3 million deal. I mean, obviously, he's not going to be a guy playing a whole lot, and it's a cheap deal. But there's probably better options the Bucks could have gotten, right? So I agree. That's not the best ad in the world. It's good for DeLon Wright. I mean, for these guys that are on like the fringes of NBA teams where they're, not really playing all that much, not getting a lot of time, if they get signed to any contract, it's a big deal. Like you even see like Luka Garza getting a 2-year deal with the Timberwolves. That's great for him. He hasn't been playing any. Timberwolves haven't played him at all because they got all those bigs with Naz Reid and Rudy Gobert and Cat. Like, they got all those bigs, so they don't need Garza. But you also had, like, with free agency, Chris Paul, which I made a short on Chris Paul. But he is going to the Spurs. And to me, when I look at Chris Paul, he's in his Vince Carter stage, where Vince Carter was an elite player. And by the time he got toward the end of his career, he decided not to hang it up. He decided like he was going to continue to play NBA basketball until basically he couldn't, or like nobody else would sign him, or he literally wasn't playing at all. Because that last year he was in the NBA with the Atlanta Hawks, he was barely like playing at all. And we know like Udonis Haslem for the Heat, like he didn't play for the last 10 years hardly. Like when he came in, it was like, wow, he's in the game. And when he scored, like it was an event. But some of these guys, it's like they just want to play for as long as possible. They just want to be in the NBA for as long as possible. Some guys, they want to end while they're still on top. Kind of like Dwayne Wade. Dwayne Wade left when he was still really good. He didn't leave when he was like at the very tail end of his career. Like, you're like a beat up car with 500,000 miles on it, and like you still work. But it's rough. Like, you can still get to point A to point B, but it's going to be loud. It might be sputtering a little bit, but whatever. I mean, it's better than, not working at all. So, I mean, like, if you can still play, I see why these guys want to stay in the league. But, like, you get to a point where, I mean, clearly you can't do what you used to do. And Chris Paul, love the guy. I mean, I know a lot of people don't like Chris Paul, but, I mean, he's a really good player. I mean, he's had a great career. He's never won a ring. But to me, that doesn't matter. I think Chris Paul is a guy that, in my opinion, doesn't have to have a ring to be considered one of the best point guards in NBA history. When in his prime, he was insanely good. Elite passer. One of the best mid-range shooters in NBA history. I mean, the guy was fantastic. But he's nowhere near what he used to be. I mean, this was the first season of his career with the Warriors this past season where he didn't average 10 points per game. And he's 39. I mean, that's impressive. To go all the way until you're 39 without scoring less than 10, which I know if any LeBron James fans are here, they're going to be like, well, look at LeBron James. I mean, that's an anomaly. LeBron, it's fantastic what he's still doing. It's a rarity. But Chris Paul, still a solid player. The Spurs, not a great team. They're not going to be a great team for many years. It's going to take him a while to build that thing up. So he's only on a 1-year deal, but I do think this ends Chris Paul's chances of winning a ring unless somehow he goes to another team. Unless he goes to another team after this, if he continues to play for like another year or two, maybe he can get on like a title contending team. Like maybe even somehow like the Celtics or Mavericks or whatever, just on like a small deal. Possibly, maybe on a small deal. And maybe he can get a ring that way. But other than that, his chances of doing that are over. But he's a good veteran presence. He's going to be a good veteran presence for those young guys, including Victor Wembanyama with the Spurs. It's going to be fun to see Paul pass it to him as well for electrifying dunks. But other than that, it's not a bad deal for the Spurs getting a veteran like him. But for Chris Paul, he's just not going to win anything. Jackson says, you can also tune into this live stream on this link at Rumble. Definitely appreciate it, Jackson. I'll also have a Rumble channel where I post all my videos and my live streams over there. If you'd like to follow me on Rumble, would appreciate it. Also, follow me on Twitter as well. Definitely trying to get my follows up on Rumble and Twitter, would appreciate it. And definitely, if you're enjoying the show, subscribe to the channel. We're getting close to 2,700 subs, trying to get to 3,000. We're inching closer and closer. Appreciate all the support. Like the stream down below as well. Stream out on social media and tell a friend or a family member about the channel. Definitely anybody that likes sports, this is the place to be. Definitely would appreciate it. But we got RC saying only talk sports. Imagine Tatum and Brown fighting over the $10 million difference. $304 million last year to Brown and $314 to Tatum. Man, I forgot about that. $304 million. I said like $250. $304, you're right. It was $304. So two guys, 6 two players. I mean, obviously that's over years, many years, but wow, that is unbelievable. I mean, obviously, like the value of the dollar's worth less now than it used to be. People are being paid more, but man, I mean, think about back in the day, like 40 years ago, when Michael Jordan first entered the league in 1984, like the contracts they were getting wasn't nothing compared to now. I mean, obviously it was better than like the 60s where NBA players and ABA players had to work like a regular job and play basketball. I mean, think about that. Like they weren't even paying them enough because they didn't have enough money because there wasn't enough interest in the leagues to, pay them enough where that was their only job. But 304 and 314 million. I mean, they're great players. Tatum and Brown are great players, but that's astronomical. RC says, only tall sport. Chris Paul is going to be worn down by Wemby. Wemby going to have to carry CP3 down the court in transition or get Paul a motorized grocery store rider. Yeah, I mean, Wemby, even though he's tall, I mean, he's like the antithesis of Zach Edey. Like Zach Edey, I think he's going to have some success in the NBA. I think he's going to have some success, even though the Grizzlies drafting him at number 9 was way too high. But that's a whole other story with the draft. But Wemby, at his height, him being able to run the floor like a gazelle and dribble and put the ball, through his legs, crossover dribble, get to the rim, it's insane. His stroke from 3, he's a unicorn. He's fun to watch. Absolutely fun to watch. But yeah, I mean, Chris Paul, he's going to be slower. That's hilarious. Jackson says, if you love hot takes, check out Twitter link and Rumble link and Only Talk Sports. Appreciate you for stopping by tonight. It says great show and feedback. Absolutely. If you guys stick around, I will be putting the call-in StreamYard link very soon once I get done talking about all the free agency moves. We'll be definitely happy to talk about whatever you guys want to talk about with free agency, with the NBA. Tons of players moving around. I'm sure there's going to be more moves as well, but just so much to talk about. It's just hard to cover everything, but definitely we'll have the call-in link soon. Probably will go until like 12 to 12:30. Don't want to go too late, but definitely got a lot to talk about. And then RC says, only tall sports C, you should have told me you were going to do the show laughing a lot. I love talking free agency NBA. I've been a guest on 2 shows already today talking to NBA free agency. This is an exciting time. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the thing is that this is one of the most exciting times of the year when it comes to the NBA because especially now with like free agency seems to be the way that a lot of people are building their team. I mean, it used to be the draft, and I think the draft should still be the way a lot of people build their teams. The Thunder did it right. Thunder absolutely did it right. They traded for SGA, and then they got all those draft picks, and they just hit after hit. All these draft picks they've hit on. Absolutely just nailed all these picks. But, yeah, I mean, free agency, like if your team is a piece or 2 away from being a title contender, you get the right pieces, you get the right players, you definitely can do some special things. Then you also have Eric Gordon. Philadelphia 76ers giving him a deal. I think that's a solid bench piece. Eric Gordon, one of the most underrated players in NBA history, in my opinion. I mean, the guy is like 16th all time in threes. I mean, like all the players that are ahead of him in the 3-point, like the amount of 3-pointers made, the amount in NBA history, they're all like multi-all-stars and like some of the most well-known players of all time. And then you got like, you go down the list, you're like, wow, all-star, like NBA champion. And then you got Eric Gordon. I mean, Eric Gordon has hit more threes in the NBA than Kevin Durant. Obviously, Durant, a lot of his game is the mid-range too, but Eric Gordon's a solid player. He's never been elite. Even in his prime, and he was really, really darn good, but he was never elite. Won 6th Man of the Year once, but like he's never really been an all-star. He's just been a solid player for almost 2 decades. Been in the league now for 17 years, going on his 17th year. But he's going to be a solid bench piece for the 76ers. I mean, they had to get somebody that was cheap, considering they just are now paying PG-13 and Maxey and Embiid. I mean, you can't have everybody expensive, except the Celtics. Somehow they're able to do it. But yeah, definitely Eric Gordon. I don't think that's a bad addition. I mean, he's an older guy, but not a bad addition. They also $1 million deal. I mean, Andre Drummond, he's an okay player. He's fine. He averaged like 8 points this past season. He'll just be a decent backup for Embiid. I don't think it's a bad move. The other big move as well that not a lot of people are talking about, I'm sure if Austin, because he loves the Nuggets, if he calls in, he'll want to talk about this, but KCP, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, going to the Orlando Magic. 3 years, $66 million deal. That's good for him. Shocking, though, that the Nuggets let him go. I mean, obviously, the Nuggets, they're a small market team. It's tougher to pay everybody than it is a bigger team, like a Boston Celtics or Los Angeles Lakers or something. But, yeah, I mean, he was really solid for the Nuggets. They had to get rid of Bruce Brown. Now KCP's gone. Are the Nuggets are they going to start like falling apart a little bit? I don't know. We'll see what moves they make, but tough loss to lose KCP. Good addition for the Magic, and they were a 5 seed this past season. They were good this past year in the NBA, so that move's only going to make them better. Kate Cunningham got an extension. That's not a surprise. Patrick Williams got a 5-year, $90 million deal over Clippers, and that's about it. That's really about all the moves. So I'll put the call-in link in real quick for you guys if you guys would like to call in and talk about these free agency moves. But yeah, definitely the big ones though are Paul George and Klay Thompson. Those are the big ones, but there are some other big moves as well. There's that'll be interesting to see what happens in the days, because I know there's going to be a couple more big moves. Before this is all said and done. Jackson says, tell your friends and family, your frenemies, and the cashiers at Publix about Only Talk Sports, where he gives some of the hottest takes in the sports world. It don't matter who it is. It doesn't matter who it is. It could be at Publix, could be at Walmart, Dollar General, doesn't matter. It could be at your local gym. Anybody that likes sports, definitely Only Talk Sports is the place to be, for sure. There's definitely a lot of people talking sports on the internet, but here at Only Talk Sports, try my best to give the best unbiased coverage of the NBA, NFL, college football, and college basketball. Try to talk sports every single day, or at least I try to. That's my slogan at the beginning of my videos. I try to talk sports every single day. Sometimes not a lot going on, or life happens, can't sometimes have any time to make a video, but I try to make videos all the time and trying to grow the channel. Love talking sports and always have fun talking to you guys. RC says, Only Talk Sports, the Clippers will now be wounded without PG services. They play with fire, got burnt. Kawhi can't stay healthy. They deal him too, and they're shopping Westbrook. Yeah, definitely the Clippers are in an interesting situation. The only good thing about it is that the Clippers, now that they're getting rid of Paul George, they're going to have some money to get somebody, but they're going to have to make sure who they get's really good, or they're not going to be as good of a team even as they were this past season. But our first caller of the night, we got Jackson coming on to the show to talk some NBA free agency. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. How you doing tonight?
Doing pretty good. I'm enjoying all the news that's going on. It's been a lot of fun to see where these players are going to go. But, I wasn't going to do a live for it, but, there's just so much news going on. It's unbelievable, the amount of news, but so fun to talk about. But what do you want? What's the first thing you want to talk about with all these moves going on?
Well, I got to be honest. I just can't believe it's the end of an era for Golden State with Klay Thompson going to the Mavericks. I wonder if he can be that jolt that gets the Mavericks to the NBA Finals, like gets them winning it all.
Absolutely. It feels like it is. It really does. The only problem is that the competition at the top of the NBA right now with all the good teams that there are, with the Celtics and the Mavericks now, and the Timberwolves and the Nuggets and the Thunder and the Bucks, all these teams, the Knicks, and I guess the Sixers, there's a lot of competition. It's very narrow, the gap between the talent on these teams. Disadvantage, because you could say, well, since there's so many good teams at the top, maybe this addition won't be enough to get them over the top. But then on the other hand, you can say, well, since it's so close, maybe Klay Thompson is just enough, because he is still good. He is still a good player. He averaged 17 points this past season, almost shot 40% from three still. It's just the fact that, a lot of people are souring on him because the Warriors were bad. They were not very good this past season. Their defense was abysmal. But I think overall, it's just the collective unit of the Warriors with Draymond and Curry and Klay. They're all getting slightly worse. The only one that really has avoided the decline is Curry. It doesn't seem like he's getting worse, but I don't think he is as good as he was 5 years ago. Even if it's not barely like he's worse, he is a little bit worse. So the Warriors, them being a much worse team, make Klay look bad.
Yeah. Well, and I also heard today that the Warriors were retiring Klay Thompson's jersey. So it was like, wow, it really is the end of an era. But Paul George and the 76ers, I would like to see Paul George get a title, but I'm not counting on it, considering the fact his history has just been coming up short in the playoffs. And I know somebody in the chat's talking about James Harden and the Clippers. That's another guy who can't get it done in the postseason. Great in the regular season, but a disaster in the postseason.
Absolutely. Certain players are. I mean, you either have the clutch, gene or you don't. And the margin for error when you get to the playoffs is so thin. I mean, you talk about like the Cowboys and in the NFL, which when that comes back around yet again, are they going to do anything? Like they get hyped up every year, and then what happens? They don't do anything. I mean, they literally just completely fall flat on their face, and they blow it in the playoffs. The margin for error in the playoffs is thin. You have to be at your best in the playoffs. Like, it doesn't matter how good your season is. It doesn't matter how good your regular season is if you choke in the playoffs. That's what people thought the Celtics were going to do because they had, great records the past couple years, and then they blew it in the playoffs. This year they didn't, even though people are like, oh, the schedule was easy. I think that's a bit overblown. I see the argument, but they were a great team. Finally played like it. But yeah, I mean, Paul George, I think he's a good player. I really do. 9-time All-Star. He was good with Indiana. I mean, he was good with the Clippers. I mean, he's been good his whole career, but he doesn't have any hardware. He doesn't have anything to show for it, really, outside of making a lot of money. I mean, he's got a lot. He's got that to show for it. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like the 76ers, I mean, this is just kind of like a day late, dollar short type of thing. Like, this is not Paul George from 5 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's Paul George now, and he's still good. But all these players that are like aging, the James Harden, the Kawhi Leonard, the Paul Georges, the Klay Thompson, they're all getting worse, right? LeBron, like, they're all getting worse. Even if Curry and LeBron have kind of defied the odds and they're still almost just as good, especially Curry, they're all getting worse. And when you reach a point where you start to get worse, that's when you don't sign these guys, especially if you're relying on them to get you over the hump, because of the fact when you talk about these other teams like the Thunder, they got young talent that's just going to keep getting better, right? They're going to keep improving. And then you talk about Paul George, he's going to start declining more. Because literally their window now, they've put their window the next 2 years. If they don't do anything in the next 2 years, they're not going to win anything with Paul George. And with the amount of good teams that there are, I don't see it happening, especially if they can't stay healthy.
Well, I noticed that the Celtics have been having a great day today. They're keeping Jaylen Brown, not Jaylen Brown. I forget his name. It's Tatum. They're keeping him for the next 5 years. It's like they're both so good. I get my mind mixed up with both of them.
Yeah, that's why a lot of Celtics fans are just like the Jays. They're just the Jays. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. I mean, both of them. I feel like, in my opinion, I don't know if you agree with this, Jackson, but I feel like when they first entered the league, Tatum was leagues better than Brown. Like, yeah. Tatum was like, there was a gap between the two. Like, Brown was good. He was a good second option, but Tatum was legitimately the best player. Now I feel like Jaylen Brown has closed that gap where it's like 1A, 1B. He's not a second option, right? Like, Jaylen Brown is basically just as good as Tatum. I mean, I still put Tatum ahead of Brown, and obviously his contract reflects that. He's just slightly getting paid more, but I think Jaylen Brown is caught up to Tatum. I really do. I feel like he's gone from a second option and by far the inferior player to Tatum to now both of them are just neck and neck good.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens for Boston in the future. But
for sure. I mean, since they're keeping the whole team together, they could win it again. For sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll probably get off here and there's plenty of callers sitting there waiting to call Only Talk Sports, where you talk sports every day, or at least try to. And folks, a lot of you want to just get the hell away from hearing about 2024 election this, 2024 election that. You hear your older siblings and your parents getting in an argument over who's better between each presidential candidate. But not here, not at Only Talk Sports, because what do you hear? You're going to hear a lot about the college football world, the college basketball world, NBA, and NFL right here at Only Talk Sports. Check out this man up above me on X and on YouTube and on Rumble. He will give you some of the hottest takes in the sports world. Stay tuned.
I appreciate it, Jackson. Thanks for coming on. It was a lot of fun talking NBA free agency, and I'm sure with more news coming around, especially with NFL and college football. What's going on, but do appreciate you for coming out. Always appreciate the shout outs, man. It definitely helps the channel, and it's man, always having you or Will or Austin or any of you guys in chat on. So if you guys would like to call in, would definitely appreciate it. But thanks again for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me on, man. Stay safe, stay cool, and have a wonderful rest of the show.
Appreciate it, Jackson. Have a good night.
You too.
That was Jackson, folks, calling into the show. If you guys would like to call in, I will re-put the StreamYard link in the chat so you guys can call into the show and talk about NBA free agency. We'll probably be going live for another, I guess you would say, maybe around 30 to 45 minutes, depending on how much there is to talk about. But yes, I mean, again, there is tons of news going on with NBA free agency. And there's a lot of rumors as well. I mean, there's a lot of guys that haven't even, announced what's going on. Like LeBron James. Like, we all know that LeBron James is just like, I guess you would say, he's kind of leading us on here, right? He's playing with us a little bit because the Lakers just drafted Bronny. They just drafted Bronny. So LeBron's staying with the Lakers. He's not going to another team. I mean, if LeBron James ended up going to another team and Bronny was on the Lakers, that would just be like one of the most ultimate failures in history for the Los Angeles Lakers, because instead of actually using that draft pick on a good player, like they instead, they drafted Bronny to appease LeBron, and then LeBron end up leaving. Like he ends up going to another team. That would just be messed up. That would absolutely be messed up. I would be blown away if that happened. I would just be laughing so hard. I got nothing against the Lakers. I don't. Like, are the Lakers one of my utmost favorite teams? No. Again, I keep it unbiased though. Like me saying, like, when I made that Lakers video the other day and I said that they were a joke, I don't hate the Lakers. It's just that was stupid to draft Bronny just to keep LeBron. But like I said, if LeBron ended up going somewhere else, though, if he did, I mean, people would be laughing about that forever. Like even when LeBron is out of the league, right, and he retires one day, if that happened, people would be saying that forever. So we got to see what LeBron's going to do. There's a lot of other free agency, like a lot of players that still haven't announced yet. I mean, right now, going over to the CBS free agency tracker, as you can see there, LeBron James, new team. It hasn't shown it yet. We know he's going to stay with the Lakers, and we know that he is, but hasn't officially made a move yet. DeMar DeRozan, he has not made a move yet either. He's still, in limbo, but probably you would think, the Bulls, I mean, it would be tough for them to lose him, but we'll have to see what happens with him. And then Klay Thompson, it shows that he hasn't moved, but yes, the CBS article hasn't been updated yet because he's gone to the Mavericks. Nicholas Claxton's still out there. I mean, there's some free agents left. Still some free agents left. But all in all, most of the big ones have already made the move. Another player, I didn't even mention him, but Isaiah Hartenstein has gone to the Thunder too. So the Thunder, they're loading up. The Thunder are definitely loading up on players. I mean, he's a solid player. I mean, he's not going to be the focal point at center for the Thunder, but still, he gives, I guess you say more rest for Chet Holmgren. more rest for Chet Holmgren. So definitely an interesting move there. I think it's a solid move by the Thunder to land him. And then the Knicks, they couldn't pay everybody. The Knicks were definitely way oversigned. Still don't know how the Celtics aren't oversigned, but somehow they're keeping the whole team together. Steven Cherry, appreciate you for stopping by. He says, hello, Jeffrey. My Mavericks will own the NBA next season, championship or bust. Well, adding Klay Thompson is a great move. If you would like to call into the show, I got the StreamYard link in the chat. If you just want to watch the show as well, definitely just still appreciate you for stopping by, Steven. But I got the call-in link for anybody in chat who would like to call into the show. Be going live for probably another 30 to 45 minutes talking about NBA free agency. But definitely, I mean, your Mavericks, though, Steven, I mean, that move to get Klay Thompson is a good one because they're not paying him too much. $50 million deal is not bad. I mean, it's not Paul George's contract. I'm just blown away at the amount of money that is. That is astronomical. I mean, like I said, I know that he wanted that much money. I really do. I know that he did. But at the same time, I do believe that it would have been better for the 76ers to give him a smaller contract, right? Like if you're going to give him a 4-year deal, maybe it's like $150 million, but it is what it is. I mean, I'm not Paul George. I mean, it's going to be the last big contract of his career because people, forget, obviously like most players' careers are 10 to 15 years. I mean, we've only now started to get into the era where players are lasting 20 years, 20 seasons. Used to never be the case. A lot of times, even like in the heyday, you talk about some of the greats of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. A lot of those guys only played like 12, 13 seasons. But now a lot of these guys, are playing 20 years. But Paul George, this is going to be his last big contract, though. Absolutely. He's not going to get another one. So I just feel like Paul George is smart to take the money. I mean, is it bad for the 76ers? Yes, it's terrible. But it's nothing wrong with Paul George taking the contract because, like I said, last big contract of his career. You might as well take it if a team's going to dish it to you. Steven said, just wanted to drop in and give a shout-out to you. Got to go to work tomorrow. Definitely call in next time. Appreciate that, Steven. I wanted to go live earlier, just couldn't really fit it in and just thought it was able to fit it in around 11 o'clock. But, yeah, I'll try to find a way to maybe go live a little bit earlier, like next live stream. I might try to do, I don't know, because I usually do live streams for games, the call for the play-by-play reactions of the games and when for like the playoffs or the regular season. But I don't usually do a lot of, lives about like current events. I don't normally do that, but I do feel like a lot of people like to talk about stuff as they happen. Because a lot of times, like, I'll just go live for games and then I'll talk about what's happened, which is fine. It's good. But, when stuff's currently going on, though, you want to be able to talk about it as it's happening. Because not that everybody's attention spans are bad. Like, a lot of people, they fault Gen Z and even worse, Gen Alpha, the younger kids. Like, that we don't have good attention spans. I don't have a bad attention span. I do know some people that do have bad attention spans where it's like after like an hour, people have already moved on to something else. That's why I like TikTok's big because people like watch something for 10 seconds and then they go to a different thing. I can't do that. If I watch like 100 TikTok shorts or whatever, YouTube shorts, my brain wouldn't even be able to remember all of them. Like how are you supposed to just keep up with all that? I can't do it. I can't do it. So I like, focusing on something like, my channel kind of reflects that, right? So like a lot of times college basketball is going on. I'm talking about that or college football or the NFL. Right now it's the NBA and like the off season, but it's about to switch back to football because I got a lot of people that like my channel for football. That's why I'm only talking. Football's coming back around. We're getting very, very close to that. And I know Austin cannot wait for some football. I can't wait for football. A lot of you guys can't wait for football. But football is going to be coming back around, and the channel will start to flip back to that. We'll be talking about, predictions and players, committing to programs, transferring, and all that kind of stuff, and hot seat videos. I mean, we're going to have it all again this year. Maybe try to do some different type of videos, try to, change it up a little bit. We've been I've had my channel for around 2 years. Got to change it up, keep it fresh, add new viewers, get people that are interested in different things. We're going to have it all here at Only Talk Sports. So if you want to be along for the ride, subscribe down below. Would really appreciate it. But definitely, again, appreciate your stopping by, Steven. Definitely kind of went off a tangent a little bit. I know it's not what you guys are here for. I'm talking about all sorts of stuff, but just trying to give you guys a slight update about what's going to be moving forward with the channel. But Sports Talk with Austin, though, in the chat. Appreciate you for stopping by. Says, what's up, guys? Before Klay Thompson signed to the Mavericks, where did you have the Mavericks on the title contenders odds? It's a great question. If you like to call in, Austin, I got the StreamYard link in the chat if you would like to call in and talk about KCP leaving your favorite team. The Nuggets going to the Orlando Magic. RC asking where is the link. I'm putting it in the chat again right there for you if you'd like to call in. But that's a good question, Austin. I would say that the Mavericks were probably, I would say, like the fourth or fifth best team in the odds to win. Now they're probably third. Maybe even second. I would say third, though, because a lot of people are high on the 76ers, but I think that dip's gonna lower. People are just buying into the 76ers right now with Paul George and Embiid and Maxey. But when people see more and more into that, they're going to realize it's not really all that it's cracked up to be, right? Like, it's not the best. So I would say the Mavericks probably around like fourth or fifth, because people got to remember that the Mavericks were a lot lower. I mean, they were a lot lower last season. They were the fifth seed in the West, and they still ended up somehow getting to the title. So, I mean, now people are thinking higher because they made it. But we got RC calling into the show. How you doing?
What's going on? So two things I wanted to talk about real quick. The Lakers and, my Timberwolves. There's one more thing as well. What you think about Donovan Clingan going number 7? I like that. To the Trailblazers. DeAndre Ayton, you in trouble. You in trouble.
I think Donovan Clingan is a really good player. I really do. I think he's a great player. I mean, winning a national championship, that's huge. I mean, anytime you can win a national championship in college, like, that's going to boost your profile. Like, I believe him and Castle, if they didn't win the title, would have been drafted lower probably. I mean, that's how much that boosted them. Trailblazers aren't a very good team. I mean, I always felt bad for Damian Lillard out there. I mean, he never won anything. But it is a really good ad for them.
I only saw him play a handful of times, but I like the talent that I've seen, and I think he could help change the culture, help, be the kind of player that Chauncey Billups need over there, because he desperately need hard workers. So, Aiden don't really like competition, so he might be on the hot seat.
Absolutely, he could be. And Ayton, he never reached his potential, and he still hasn't, because like the Suns, like, there was one point when that team was like really good and they almost won the title that year with Chris Paul, when he was still way better than he currently is. I felt like Ayton was close, but he's just kind of stalled. He's never improved from that season. He's just stalled out. And now he goes to a worse team, and it's not like he's really doing significantly better. Because usually, like, if you want to somehow like reach your potential, go into a bad team and you could just ball out, do whatever. Because a lot of people just felt like, oh, Damian Lillard, he's not all that good because he's on a bad team. He goes to the Bucks and he's still great. Even though he's older, he's still great. He's not a bad player. It's just the team was not good. That one year when he waved bye-bye to the Thunder, though, with CJ McCollum, I mean, that was it. That was the highlight. But I think for Ayton, though, I mean, it's sad that he has not gotten better. And yes, you're absolutely right. He's not a big fan of competition. So, I mean, Clingan could definitely pass him eventually. And that's real bad when you get passed, if you do get passed by a rookie, and he's getting paid a lot more, Ayton is. So that would be bad for him.
Yeah. Scoot Henderson, he better be prepared to play this season. You better be prepared. But the other thing is, I'm picking your brain because you watch men's college basketball a little bit more than I do. And so what you think about the Wolves getting this Rob Dillingham kid? I've heard comparisons like Tyrese Maxey. I've heard John Wall. I've heard De'Aaron Fox. You gonna match him, put him in the backcourt with Ant-Man in the future. What do you think about Dillingham? They traded to get him.
I mean, those comparisons are fantastic because all those players played for John Calipari,
Right.
and Rob Dillingham played for John Calipari. So, I mean, definitely Calipari, whatever you want to say about him and, as a coach, because a lot of people don't think he's a great coach. I think he's okay. I mean, he's able to recruit.
Yeah.
The guy can recruit. He can get whoever he wants. But, I mean, I look at a guy like Devin Booker when he was in college. He wasn't that good in college. He actually got benched in the middle of the season, goes to the Phoenix Suns, and within like a year and a half, the guy's already an all-star, and he's elite. So I think Dillingham didn't even show half of what he had at Kentucky. That's almost, to me, what all those players at Kentucky did. A lot of them didn't even show half of their potential. So Dillingham is probably going to be a guy that, like the previous Kentucky players Calipari had that didn't showcase everything, he's going to explode onto the scene in the pros and become, a player that no one really was expecting, or at least people that don't really pay attention to, I guess, Kentucky basketball. Because a lot of people, I remember, like, oh, Booker's not that great, or Maxey's okay, or Dillingham's okay. And then they go pro, and then they're elite. Because they were elite in high school. I just think Calipari didn't know how to use them very well. So that's why Rose, but it's like they didn't even do that well for him. But I think he's going to be fantastic next to Anthony Edwards. I mean, they needed another guard because Conley's about to age out. He's still solid, but doesn't have much time left. So I think it's a fantastic addition for the Timberwolves. They did a great job.
It's going to be interesting watching him and Reed Shepherd, both bench players coming into the the league. So yeah, that's going. And then like the Lakers, I thought they knocked it out the park with Dalton Connect. And then you heard he chose jersey number 4, right? Connect 4.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was smooth. So I like that pick. But then again, I don't know what to think about Bronny James. But it seems like that's the only thing the Lakers want to do. It's just this is my thing. What are they doing with the free agency? Like they misfired with Klay. I mean, you can't run this team back. And I was gonna put that in your comment section, but I'm like, let me just call in and see what you cannot return the same team. You can't.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot put
Absolutely.
the same. So I don't know if you agree with that or disagree, but I mean, because they seem to be re-signing all of the same players. They just signed back Jackson Hayes. I don't have a problem with Max Christie, but they don't never play him. And also, you talk about Bronny real quick. I mean, he's not even better than Jalen Hood-Schifino or Max Christie or Dalton Connect. So I bet not see him before I see them. If you get my drift, I better not see him before I see them. So yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say, man. I appreciate
absolutely.
What you're doing over here.
I appreciate you for calling in. I appreciate it a lot. It's finally nice to talk to you.
Yeah. Okay, man. I'm gonna let you go. I'm gonna listen to you on the other side.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you for calling in, and I always love seeing your comments in the chat. They give me a chuckle. I love it.
Okay. All right. Peace.
That was RC calling into the show. He's been a longtime viewer, and he always has some of the greatest quotes in the chat. Everything he said coming in makes a ton of sense. I definitely agree with him on with the Lakers for sure. I mean, you just cannot re-sign everybody and think, oh, we're going to be better now. I mean, like he said, Max Christie is a solid player, but I mean, they're giving him a bigger contract, but if they don't play him, it's not going to matter. It's absolutely not going to matter. Jalen Hood-Schifino, I mean, again, I'm an unbiased, sports fan, but Schifino did play for Indiana, and a lot of you guys know I do like Indiana. But again, unbiased. I did think Jalen Hood-Schifino the 1 year. He was good in Indiana the 1 year, but he wasn't really an explosive scorer. And I felt like it's kind of interesting that the Lakers did draft him when he's not really an explosive scorer. I was a bit shocked by that, but I don't think it was a terrible selection because he has potential. He had the back injury this past season, so we don't even know what he can give. He was good in the G League. He was really good in the G League, so we'll see with him. But Dalton Connect, and as RC said, the Connect 4, that is so clever. But definitely Dalton Connect is not going to be, the savior. I mean, you can't just draft him and oh, now they're going to be a contender. I mean, because he's going to be a rookie. And like Austin Reeves, as good as Austin Reeves has been, way better than it's not like he completely changed the team in his first year with the Lakers. And I don't think Dalton Connect will either. It's not like he's going to come in and average 20 points. So definitely the Lakers are going to have to do something because LeBron he can't carry the team. And I mean, he's not Luka Doncic, or he's not at that age where, he's just not 2010 LeBron. He's not even 2020 LeBron. He's still really good. I mean, LeBron James has defied age and logic. I mean, it doesn't matter because a lot of people know I'm not a LeBron James fan. I'm not a fan personally of LeBron, but I'm never going to be somebody that's like, oh, well, I don't like LeBron and he's a bad player. LeBron is a fantastic player. I mean, I can't deny that, and I'm not going to deny it. He is a fantastic player. And he still is. And the fact that he is this good still at his age is unreal. But he can't carry them. And Anthony Davis is always hurt. Always. And even when he plays, he's inconsistent. I mean, some games he has 35 and 20 rebounds. In other games, he has like 10 and 10. So he's not consistent. So definitely they're going to have to make some moves. Bronny James, absolutely. Like I said in my video about Bronny getting drafted, RC bringing it here, saying Bronny James would not have gotten drafted if his name was Eric Brown out of USC. Laughing out loud. Absolutely. And that's what's so irritating. So irritating. I mean, it's almost like, and again, this is not relative to sports, but it is comparable to this. It's like when you have like a dynasty or something, like, about those old Chinese dynasties, or you have like in Britain, like we have like the York family, all those like the Lancasters, all that kind of stuff. The thing is that just because like somebody in that lineage was a good king doesn't mean that their son is going to be a good leader. Like they automatically like anoint him like, oh, my firstborn son is now the king, following me in succession. It's like, well, he was a good king, but his son wasn't, right? But it's like, oh, because he was the son, he gets the position. That doesn't work. I mean, just because LeBron James is arguably the best player of all time, even though I say it's Michael Jordan, but LeBron has he has the case, and in a lot of people's mind, he is the best player ever. Doesn't mean Bronny's going to be good. I mean, it just doesn't. The genes, it doesn't matter. It doesn't. I mean, you can be the son of a player and be good. I mean, look at Dale Davis. Dale Davis' son, Trace Jackson Davis, is good. But it doesn't mean that your son is going to be good. It just doesn't. I mean, look at Dale Curry. Dale Curry wasn't that good, and his son's one of the best. He is the best shooter of all time. He's one of the best players. But then Steph Curry's brother, Seth Curry, is okay. He's an okay player. People just get overblown with the family stuff. And I think LeBron hurt the Lakers by having them draft Bronny. All they had to do is take David Jones out of Memphis or some other player. I mean, David Jones didn't get – he was still on the board. He was still on the board with the 55th pick, and he averaged 22 points per game this past season in college. Like, even if the guy flames out and doesn't do anything, there's a better chance he's going to be good than Bronny, who averaged less than 5 points. So, I don't know. I mean, the Lakers should not have appeased LeBron in that regard. They should have just taken Bronny as an undrafted free agent right when the draft ended. Because none of those teams after the Lakers, with the 56th, 7th, and 8th pick, they wouldn't have drafted Bronny. All they had to do was just take him Bronny as an undrafted free agent. It have been LeBron still could have played with it, but no, he wanted his son to get drafted. It's just a they just keep re-signing the same players. They're just going to be a 500 team again. Sports Talk with Austin says, where are the Celtics getting all this money from? They've re-signed everyone. How are they doing it? If you like to call in, Austin, would definitely appreciate it if you like to come in and call into the show. But if you like to just sit in the chat, it's okay as well. But I'm actually flabbergasted as well. I don't know what to say because I know that you have the luxury tax and you can exceed like the cap or whatever. Like in the NFL, you can't exceed the cap. The MLB's really messed up, and I think it's unfair. But the MLB has it where the teams in the big cities, like the New York Yankees or Boston Red Sox or the Houston Astros or Atlanta Braves or the Los Angeles Dodgers. You get the idea. All those teams, like, they have more cap than like the Cincinnati Reds or the St. Louis Cardinals, which is unfair. I mean, how can they compete? That's why the Reds haven't been good in 40 years. You know, like, there's so many people that were Reds fans, like Gen X and boomers that love the Reds because they were good, and now the Reds stink. I mean, they've been a little better the last couple of years, but they're not title worthy or anything, title contending. But MLB's cap's messed up. The NFL, it's fair because they all have the same cap, and it's like you choose what you do with it. That's why with some of these QBs that have like 25 to 30% of the team's salary cap, it's like you're giving up 25% of your team's salary cap on the QB. Like, you should be paying the QB like 15% of that. Because you got to pay all the O-linemen, all the D-linemen. You got to have good O-linemen or the quarterback's useless. Like, if you got a terrible O-line, but you're paying a quarterback $30 million a year and he gets hurt in week one, it don't matter. I mean, like the Jets, like Aaron Rodgers gets hurt in week one and their whole season got blown up last year. But to get to your point, Austin, I don't know. I honestly have no idea where the Celtics are getting all the money. I mean, they have to be way over the luxury tax. I mean, I'm not an any sport, but definitely the NBA, because I've always been confused, because it seems like the NBA is kind of a mix between the MLB and the NFL, where they kind of have the rules of the NFL, like you're not supposed to exceed the salary cap, but you can with the luxury tax. But I thought there was like a certain limit you couldn't pass, but obviously you can, because you know they're not doing anything about it with the Celtics. But then it's also like you talk about the fact that different teams have different salary cap figures. Like, small market teams kind of have to be tighter with their money, kind of like the Nuggets are right now. That's why they had to get rid of KCP and Bruce Brown. Whereas bigger market teams like the Lakers and Celtics, they can seem to get away with more, like have more players. I don't really know how it works. So like I said, I do not claim to be an expert with the financial aspects of salary caps and whatnot in the NBA, or any sport, but it doesn't make sense. I'd have to read more into it. Maybe like there's like an article or something that explains how in the world the Celtics are paying all these players. Maybe there is an article on that, but I don't know. RC says Detroit has a good coach now in Bickerstaff. If they would give him time, I like the veteran additions of Tobias Harris and Tim Hardaway Jr., and they get a flyer on defensive mind of Wendell Moore Jr. The thing about Detroit, I don't understand them. I mean, the thing is that with Monty Williams, like, I can't say. I legitimately cannot say if Monty Williams is a good coach or not. I don't know. I mean, he's been with 3 teams. He was with the Pelicans, he's been with the Suns, and he was with the Pistons. And guess what? The team that he did the best on was the Suns, because the Suns had the best players out of the 3 teams that he coached on. Even though the Suns never won a title, he was their coach when they got to the title game that one year. But then it's like, okay, well, the last year he was with the Suns, didn't do as well, even though I still think the Durant trade, where they basically traded everything to get Durant, and then they didn't have any good bench players, that was the whole reason of that. So, I mean, if that was Monty Williams' fault or if it was like the administration's fault, I have no idea. But then you talk about him going to the Pistons once he got fired from the Suns. The problem is they gave him a 5-year, like, $65 million contract. That's a whole lot of money. And the thing is that they fired him after 1 season. So I don't get why they gave him that big contract. I mean, you could say, well, Monty Williams wouldn't have signed if they didn't give him that big of a contract, but it's like they just absolutely screwed themselves. Sorry, my internet died for a minute. Sorry about that. But why would the Texas A&M Aggies give Jimbo Fisher that big of a contract for them just to fire? And then they have to give him all that money. It doesn't make sense. It does not make sense. So that's what the Pistons did. The Pistons gave him that big contract and then fired him after 1 year. So, like I said, I can't say if he's a great coach or not. don't really know. I mean, with a lot of NBA coaches, it's kind of tough to tell if they're a good coach because the players do a lot of the heavy lifting. But, I mean, you can tell if someone's a good coach. Like, you can tell. But it is kind of hard with some, though. But, I mean, Bickerstaff, I think he was wrongfully fired with the Cavaliers. I mean, I don't think he was doing bad. I mean, he didn't have a good enough team to win a title, so I don't really know what the Cavaliers organization was expecting. But, yeah, like you said, it's all about, are they going to give him time? Because if Bickerstaff's there for a year or two and the Pistons are still losing and then they fire him, what good would it have done? I mean, it's going to take them time to rebuild that thing. It's like the Wizards. I mean, you constantly hear the Wizards, oh, well, they're in the rebuilding stage. Yeah, they're in the rebuilding stage. Their team's horrible. So it's going to take time. It's going to take time for them to fix that. The Pistons and the Wizards, the Spurs, all these teams, it's going to take time. So I agree, RC. Like, I agree that those are good additions. So at least they have some hope. But they're going to have to give Bickerstaff a chance. And if they just fire him after a year or two, then that's just dumb. I mean, you can't, give someone a contract and say, oh, well, we're going to give you time. We're going to let you try to build this thing and then fire him. It isn't fair. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair to the fans. I don't think it's fair to the team. And I don't think it's fair to the coach. Or the player. I don't think it's fair to anybody. But I'm putting the StreamYard link in again if you guys would like to call into the show. I'll probably be going live for another 20 minutes at the max. So last call for you guys wanting to call into the show. There's a lot of stuff to talk about free agency. We touched on a lot of it. We touched on a lot of the stuff in the NBA. That was the point of this show because there's so much going on right now. Wanted to be able to touch on a lot of it. We've had Jackson call in, RC as well. It's been a fun show. Appreciate you guys for stopping by. RC says, too, Cade Cunningham is a true baller on the court. But why would they draft Ron Holland, the guard from the Ignite? Only to us where they already have Jaden Ivey, Oscar Thompson, Marcus Sasser, and Jalen Noel and more. Good question. That's a good question. Ron Holland is a player that obviously a lot of people don't really know about because he played for the Ignite, which is going away. The Ignite is going away, which definitely helps college basketball. Helps college basketball because of the fact, I mean, you talk about some of those players that ended up going off to the G League Ignite and Overtime Elite, which I think Overtime Elite still exists, but those players that go off to that league, it reduces the amount of good players that are in college basketball. Like even some of the players, there's been a few that have gone like to Australia to play for a year, and then they go off to the pros. That hurts college basketball. It reduces the amount of talent in college basketball. You could say, though, in a way, it helps college basketball because it reduces the amount of one and dones, but it also reduces the amount of players that excite people. You know, I mean, imagine if Zion Williamson went to G League Ignite for a year and not Duke. You wouldn't have the whole excitement with Duke and UNC that year and all that stuff. So, Ron Holland is a player that's not really known about all that much, but based off what you said, I mean, you're right. The Pistons have a lot of guards, and they draft a guard. Kind of doesn't make sense. Cade Cunningham, he's going to be elite. I mean, he got the extension this year, but he's going to be elite. He's already really good, but they're just going to have to build around him. Hope that some of these guys, including Jay Knives and these other guys, they really develop, and maybe they could be like the Thunder, you know, winning based off their draft, you know, history, based off what they did in the draft. Build up. But they're going to have to give a coach a chance. They didn't do it with Monty Williams. Maybe they'll do it with Bickerstaff, but they probably should have drafted someone else. Maybe a forward or a center, like you, to your point, but maybe Ron Holland will be good. Who knows? Sports Talk with Austin says, I guess hers sells later on, maybe. Absolutely it does. I mean, the Celtics are clearly in win-now mode. I mean, they are in win-now mode. This is exactly what this is. They won it all, so now they're like, okay, we had the best team in the NBA this past season. So even if it does hurt us 2, 3, 4 years down the road, let's keep everybody and let's try to do it again. That's, I mean, like, for example, I've played in some, like, football, like online football leagues or whatever, you know, like those little GM leagues where you can run your team. And on one team that I had, I literally like signed a bunch of older, like, guys, either guys that were like older but were still good, and I signed like a bunch of younger guys that were great. And what ended up happening, like I had this elite team, but then it eventually just cost way too much. I won a couple titles with it, but then what ended up happening is after the fact that I was horrible for like 5 or 6 seasons. I finally got better again. But like I was horrible for many years after that. So that's what's probably gonna happen to the Celtics, Austin, to your point. That's how it works. Like they're going for the win now approach. They're not wanting to get rid of anybody, kind of like the Nuggets did. If the Nuggets had somehow been able to keep Bruce Brown and the whole team together, maybe Christian Brown improved a little bit more, Nuggets could have won it all again. But instead they got rid of him, and now they're getting rid of KCP. So the Nuggets are just getting a little bit worse. Celtics aren't getting any worse because they're keeping everybody, but they're not going to be able to pay all of them forever. Still don't know how they're doing it now. Like I said, I have no idea. But yeah, 3, 4, 5 years from now, it's absolutely going to hurt them. And they're probably going to go through a rough patch unless somehow Brad Stevens is a mastermind right now. I mean, he what he's doing is unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. All of his draft picks are hitting. All of the moves they made have been hitting. I mean, people are like, oh, I'm getting rid of Marcus Smart, Robert Williams. No. I mean, more people are like, they understood with Robert Williams, but he was a fan favorite, but the injury history. But then with like Marcus Smart, no one wanted to get rid of him. But then it's like the guy gets hurt and he's out all year. And then they got Drew Holiday and they replaced him. He ended up being better than Marcus Smart. So like every move he's made's been great. But yeah, it's going to hurt the Celtics later on down the road. Sports Talk with also sneaky free agent move is Jonas Valanciunas to the Wizards. Yeah, I agree. Jonas Valanciunas is a good player. He's solid. I mean, Pelicans averaged like 12-9 or whatever. I mean, he's not an elite player or anything, but he's a solid player, good player. Wizards, they just need competency. I mean, they had Bradley Beal forever. And it's almost like they just thought like, oh, well, Bradley Beal's our guy, and maybe like if he scores like 40 points or whatever, we'll win. But then the thing is like Bradley Beal was never like a top 5 level NBA, top 5 player in the league. I mean, at best he was like top 20, maybe. Good player. I mean, he's a great player. Bradley Beal is a great player, but he's clearly not as good anymore either. He's clearly nowhere where he used to be, which is why it was dumb for the Suns to make that trade to get him. And then it's like they still just kind of mid. I mean, they're making playoffs and stuff, but not going to win a title, which is what Durant wants. But, I mean, adding Valanciunas to the Wizards, I mean, it's like adding Tobias Harris to the Pistons. It just gives a bad team with a lot of youth a veteran. Chris Paul with the Spurs. These guys can help the youth on the team learn how to be better NBA players by learning from somebody that's been in the league for a lot longer and has that veteran experience. So it's a good move. I mean, it stinks for Valanciunas because, I mean, he's going from a pretty solid team with the Pelicans. I mean, okay to solid. I mean, they were better a couple years ago, but an okay to solid team to now a bad team. But he's getting paid more because that's what happens. When you go to a bad team, they're going to pay the veteran more. That's why Tobias Harris is getting $25 million, which is a lot more than he was at the 76ers. So it's good for Valanciunas in that regard. He just isn't going to win anything. RC said, thanks for letting me drop in on the show. Salute. Absolutely, RC. Salute to you as well. Always appreciate your insight in the chat. It was nice to talk to you for sure. I mean, that's what this was for, a call-in show. You know, just people want to call in and talk about NBA free agency. You know, anybody in chat who's been in chat tonight, if you guys want to call in, we're going to be going live for a few more minutes. But yeah, I mean, I might do, you know, some more of these in the future, maybe on some topics going on around the, you know, NBA world or college basketball, college football, you know, if these do well, you know, I mean, I don't know when I'll do another one. It's kind of like the off season right now. There's just not a lot going on around other sports. The NBA is the only one where everything's going on with the free agency. But like, it'll start to heat back up with football very soon. It's getting close. I mean, we're all like 2 months away. I can't believe it. RC says, imagine how Boogie Ellis feels. He was better than Bronny, too. At least Isaiah Collier, Ellis, and Collier were better than Bronny this year. I can say that because I've seen at least 6 Bronny USC games. Absolutely. I remember saying that. When Bronny committed. I actually made a video on it. Probably, I don't know if you guys remember. It was when Bronny committed, but I made a video on it. And I actually said in that video, I was like, watch Bronny get all the attention. Even more so than Boogie Ellis. Isaiah Collier was going to get attention because he was the number 1 recruit. But Boogie Ellis was going to get – he was absolutely going to get the shaft when it came to attention by the media. I mean, the media never talked about it. I mean, arguably Boogie Ellis, he was the best guard on the team this past year. Even Isaiah Collier had a lot of bad games, because he was hurt some. I think Collier could still be good. I mean, he was really good in high school. He just was not healthy. But Ellis is a good player, but didn't get drafted. I mean, it's almost like it's about the name recognition or something, or like where you were out of high school, or because Boogie Ellis is an older guy. I mean, I know why the NBA drafts young. I know why they draft young. I know why they take young guys, because of the fact that they're going to be in the league longer. I mean, you take a guy that's a freshman and they leave out after their freshman year, and after 20 years in the league, they're going to be 38. 39 years old. They still might be in the league, but if you leave college when you're like 23, 24, after 10 years, you're already 34. I understand why the NBA wants to take younger guys. And plus, they feel like, I've heard rumors that, we can mold a player better when he hasn't been in college for 4 years, and maybe he develops bad habits or he gets set in his ways. If they're 18, 19 and they kind of have a broken jump shot, we can fix it. I've heard all these arguments. I understand the arguments, but at the same time, it's Boogie Ellis played better than Isaiah Collier and Bronny James, yet he was the only one that didn't get drafted because he was older. I mean, it doesn't make sense. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. I don't know. It's just not really fair. Isaiah Collier, I understand why he was drafted. Bronny, absolutely not. RC says, what do you think about Zach Edey going to play with John Morant? Who benefits the most for Edey the Grizzlies? And will Edey be in Jaren and Ja's way, laughing out loud? Well, I mean, to be honest, Zach Edey's going to be in everybody's way. I mean, the guy is a load. I mean, 7'4", 300 pounds. I mean, how can he not be in people's way? Zach Edey, it's just going to be interesting because most bigs that are as tall as Zach Edey are usually on the thinner side. And usually when they're on the thinner side, they have bad knees. But the thing is that Zach Edey is a big guy. He's got a great Sorry, my internet died again. But he's not going to be quick enough to keep up with the other bigs in the NBA, in my opinion. But we got Austin calling into the show before we wrap up the show, probably in around 10 minutes or so. But we got Austin coming on to talk about NBA free agency. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good, Jeffrey. How about yourself?
Doing great, man. I mean, it's just so much going on right now with free agency. That's why I did this live stream call-in show to get you guys' thoughts. Had RC on earlier and Jackson, now you. Really interested to see what you guys are thinking about free agency. But just so much to talk about, just kind of hard to fit it all into into videos and stuff. But yeah, I mean, definitely what's on your mind?
So there's a couple things I'm kind of looking at. Number one is the Paul George signing, of course. And I know you made a video on that earlier in the day. I'll say this until the end of time. The 76ers will only go as far as Joel Embiid will take them. He's got to stay healthy, or this signing means absolutely nothing, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, he's the best player, and the best player has to carry the team. And he's been hurt last couple years. I mean, look at the Bucks. Same thing. Giannis has not been healthy the last couple years in the playoffs, so the Bucks haven't done anything, right? I mean, I feel but he's kind of doing the same. He can't stay on the floor when the playoffs come around. So the other guys, now Lillard or Middleton, they're trying to carry the team, and it's not working. They're losing. Same thing with the 76ers. I mean, if Embiid is hurt again by the playoff, by playoff time, it's not going to mean a thing. And Paul George, like I said, only averaged 6 more points per game than Tobias Harris. That's not that significantly different, and they're paying him so much more. and in a couple of years he's going to start declining hard. I don't know. I think it's a mistake too.
But here's the thing. I got to give Philly credit. I know why they made this move. It's because Boston just won a title. You know, they realized, okay, they brought back Tatum. You know, they re-signed Holiday and Derek White. And now the Sixers like, okay, what can we do to get better? Like, oh, let's go out and get the biggest free agent on the market, Paul George. Which is all fine and well, but sometimes, as we know, Jeffrey, things don't mesh.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having team chemistry is big, and I feel like that's why the Warriors had the success they had, because of the main core was always there. Yeah, the one year they had Durant, but the main core was still there. So it's like you just added somebody else that kind of like elevated them more. But like the Celtics are doing the same thing, even though, again, how me and you were just flabbergasted. Like, how are they paying everybody? I don't know, but they're keeping the band back together. They're keeping the group together, and that's going to help them probably have a shot to win it all again if everything goes to plan. If they all stay healthy and they continue to play as well as they are. But the 76ers just like, you know, they traded, you know, James Harden, and now they're getting Paul George, and it's just, they're just moving all these guys around, and they're not getting better. They're just staying kind of the same.
Well, and the thing too for me is, Jeffrey, is I don't know about you, but I'm kind of getting sick and tired of Joel Embiid getting all this help and he's still not performing. I get he's not healthy, but the management is giving him all this help and they're still not getting past the second round. That's what makes me, like, every time I hear people say, oh, they're going to make this move, and people are saying Paul George to the Sixers, this is going to make them title contenders. And I'm like, show me that you're title contenders. Stop doing all that talking. Like, show me get past the second round.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta prove it. You gotta back it up. It's kind of like, off on a little bit of a tangent for one sec, but it's like in college basketball right now, like Mike Woodson at Indiana. A lot of people are getting mad at him because he's like talking a big game, and he's kind of being like, you know, he's kind of acting like Bob Knight light, you know, diet Bob Knight. And the issue is like Bob Knight could get away with acting the way he did because he won. You know what I'm saying? Like, he won titles. He had evidence to back it up. All Mike Woodson's got is a couple draft picks and a second round appearance, round of 32 appearance in one season. And that's it. Like, so when he's talking all this big game and whatever and all this, it just doesn't land. So I get your point. It's the same thing here. It's like, if you're winning, you can talk a big game. It's not really like Embiid's talking a big game. I know what you're saying. It's a little different, but it's just, same thing with LeBron. Like, oh, LeBron, he doesn't need help, or, you know, like when he was with Miami, it's like he did it all himself, but he needed Bosh and Wade. But then it's like now he's with the Lakers, and like all they've done every year is just try to add all these different players. Like, this is the mix of guys that's going to get them back, give LeBron another ring, and it isn't working. It's the same thing with the Sixers.
Well, I think a lot of it too is, Jeffrey, let me reframe this statement. I don't think it's Embiid talking as much. I think the media's putting the pressure on him. I think the media is like, come on, Philly, you finally got your superstar, and now you got Maxey, who's emerged. You had Ben Simmons, you know, and now people are putting this pressure on him, like, you know, you said trust the process, and then you haven't gotten nowhere. And I will say, Jeffrey, that Toronto series, that was just the luckiest shot in the history of shots. You can't blame that on them. But the Hawks series and the Celtics series in years past, that's all on them.
Yeah. Yeah, that shot, man, with the Raptors, man. that oh my! I remember watching that, dude. The ball bounced on the rim like 8 times. Like, what? That thing defied gravity.
Now,
oh boy!
And another thing that's kind of interesting about this is I've seen some comparisons to the Phoenix Suns, how maybe that their bench is going to be a little weaker now with the addition of Paul George because they couldn't pay Nick Batum. Tobias Harris is gone. And it's kind of like maybe they're like the Suns with KD, Beal, and Booker, that their bench isn't going to be as good. Do you see that at all, or is this different?
I would say it's slightly different only because the Sixers have signed Eric Gordon and Andre Drummond, but it is similar. I think the Sixers bench is still slightly better than when the Phoenix Suns first made the trade to get Durant. I mean, they were depleted. Like, we're talking like outside of the star players for the Suns, they didn't have anything. That first season, the bench was dry. I mean, their bench is slightly better now, but it's still not anywhere good enough where the Suns are going to be a threat. And I would have to say the Sixers, it's borderline. Like, I think it's weak, and I think it's going to hurt them, but I don't think it's as bad as the Suns, especially that first season. But I still think the Sixers aren't good enough to win a title. I think they're close. But like I said, the window is very tight. It's just a 1 or 2 year deal. But I do believe that people underestimate the bench. I mean, you talk about the Celtics, like in that one game that Kristaps didn't play. And then it's like Xavier Tillman comes in. Xavier, like nobody's thinking about Xavier Tillman, right? And then he comes in and he hits a shot, hits a three in the corner, and he plays good defense. And it's like, it's small stuff, but like, a lot of teams wouldn't have had that. A lot of teams wouldn't have had a guy that's like your third or fourth option can come in. Like even Luke Cornett provided some decent minutes. It's like that's what, like you're saying, like you don't think the Sixers have that. You don't think that they have enough, bench, especially like if an injury does happen to Embiid or Paul George or maybe one of them isn't having a good game to be able to still play well enough to win.
Well, and I think a lot of it too is they re-signed Kelly Oubre, which you have up on the screen. I think that's a great re-signing. What a resurgence he's made to his career. And they also drafted Jared McCain. I think that's a great pickup out of Duke. But I still think there's still some work to do. Eric Gordon, who was in Phoenix, now is in Philly. But it's just, I think they're a couple pieces away still on the bench. I think the bench needs a couple more pieces. Because, like you said, what if another injury happens or someone's having a bad game? You need to be able to rely on your bench to come in and pick up the slack.
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen like these trios or whatever, like Kyrie and Durant and Harden with the Nets, and then you had Harden and Kawhi Leonard and Paul George with the Clippers. It just doesn't work. I mean, it really doesn't. I mean, it can because like I know Wade and Bosh and LeBron, but like even then that team had other options like Mike Bibby. Like they had options. It's just some of these teams, it's legitimately just the stars and that's it. Like the bench is just there. Like they play, but they don't do anything. Like I even feel like, again, the Mavericks, and this is why I picked the Celtics to win the title. I even I made, you probably remember it, Austin. You probably do, but ones in chat that didn't watch the video. When I was like evaluating the series, I put all like the player stats on the board. And the thing is, people were like, well, Dallas's stars are better than the Celtics' 2-star players, the 2 stars, right? Doncic, Irving versus Tatum, Brown. I did the math on the points, and they both actually averaged 51 points because Tatum averaged like 26, Brown averaged 25. That's 51 points. Doncic averaged 30, and Irving was like 21, 22. So it was like maybe I think Dallas might have been like 1 point more. It might have been like 52 to the Celtics 51. So that's basically a dead heat. It's even. But then when you went down the bench, and it's like, okay, there's a big drop-off from Irving to PJ Washington. Like it's from 22, 21 points, whatever. It's like 13. And then everybody else averaged 10 or less. Derrick Jones averaged like 9. Gafford averaged like 9. Big drop off. Then the Celtics, it's like, okay, you've got Derek White averaging like 18. You've got Holiday averaging like 12 or 13. Kristaps averaging like 16. Horford's averaging like 11. And then you got Pritchard and Hauser. And it goes on and on and on. The points were just so much in the Celtics' favor. I'm like, unless the Celtics bench just sucks in the finals and Tatum plays good enough, they're going to win. And they did, because Tatum played good enough and the bench was great. I mean, Pritchard comes in, doesn't do anything all game, and he hits 2 half-court threes. I mean, like, everybody did their part. Whereas the Mavericks, it's like it was all on Doncic, it was all on Irving, and in the games that they played poorly was when Doncic was just chunking up a bunch of garbage, hoping it would go in, and he hit half of them, but it's like, that's not a sustainable way to play. And if that's the way the Sixers play, where it's like, okay, here's Embiid iso ball, here's Paul George iso ball, that's not going to work. Or Maxey off the dribble. Need passing to your teammates. The 4th, 5th, and 6th options have to be solid enough players to take the attention off the stars just enough where you have to guard them. So then you can't double and triple team the stars.
Well, that was the problem. Not to go too far off this tangent of what the topic is, but like with the Celtics, they're so hard to guard, because if you double Tatum, guess what? You're leaving Holiday or Derek White or maybe even Pritchard or Hauser wide open, and you're taking a chance with them. It's ridiculous.
Yeah,
and like with the Mavs,
we don't know how they're signing all these guys again, but the fact that they have all these guys is great for them because they have so many different options. I mean, you can't guard them all. And 1 or 2 of them is going to have a good game. They're not all going to play bad, most likely.
Well, that's the thing, too, is that with teams like that, if you double Tatum or Brown, they've got, like you said, so many options. It's just ridiculous. But on the subject of the Mavericks, they signed Klay Thompson. I think that's tremendously going to be a help for them, because it adds another 3-point shooter to their team and a guy who could take you off the dribble. I feel like that's what they were missing in that Celtics series, is another guy who could stretch the Celtics out just a little bit. Other than Luka and maybe Kyrie if he gets streaky, the Celtics weren't really scared of the Mavericks. Now, if they meet again in the finals, who knows how it would have turned out if Klay was there, because Klay now stretches the defense and maybe gives Luka or Kyrie more to driving lanes, and they can kick somewhere else or go in for their patented maneuvers. I think Klay Thompson's going to be a big help, but he's coming into a loaded West, and he knows that better than anybody. Let's not kid ourselves with that. He knows better than anybody what it's like to play in the West. It's just in a different uniform now.
Yeah, there's a lot of good teams in the West, a lot of competition throughout the entire NBA, so many great teams at the top. But I agree. I mean, Klay Thompson, even though he is declining and he's, since the injury, I mean, that was a gruesome injury. It took him 2.5 years to recover. But even when he came back, he was still, almost Klay Thompson prior to the injury. But he's starting to get worse. Like he can't get to the rim on his own like as consistently as he used to. Like it almost takes more of like a set play. Like he just can't take anyone off the dribble much. But he's still a great shooter. And if he just has time, if he just can get open a little bit. Yeah. And having Irving and Doncic, on the same team as with Klay, I mean, they're going to demand so much attention that he's going to get shots. And I agree with your what you said, that the Celtics just weren't scared. I mean, how many times was PJ Washington left wide open? Because I kept seeing people on Twitter, which, I mean, it's Twitter, right? People are going to say a bunch of stuff on Twitter that's just insane. But people are like, the Mavericks they're not getting any open threes. You mean Irving and especially Doncic aren't getting any open threes? That's what you mean. They're not getting anything open. But I mean, PJ Washington, like in one of those games, I can remember. I don't remember which game it was. I think it was one of the games I did the play-by-play for. Might have been the last game. He had like 4 threes that were just wide open, and he missed them all. And it's like, you could say, well, I mean, that's not super significant because it's like, well, you got all the other players or these other shots. It's just the fact that even if he hits one of those, then they would have guarded him better. Like they would have put even some pressure on PJ Washington when he was out there. behind the 3-point line, but he missed them all. And by the end of the game, they just didn't care. They're like, okay, you can shoot it if you want. Or Derek Jones, they just leaving him open. Like Derek Jones can hit a three. I mean, PJ Washington hit a three, but they weren't consistently doing it. I mean, literally the best shooting performance from three by any Dallas player other than Irving and Doncic in the entire series was by Tim Hardaway in that one game where they were losing by 40 and he hit like 6 threes in garbage time.
Of course. I do got to say this, though, to that point, onto another topic, Derek Jones Jr., who you just brought up, he signed with the Clippers. I think that's an interesting move considering they brought Harden back on a 2-year, $70 million deal. They now add Derek Jones Jr., who brings a little defense to the team. Batum's coming back. I don't know what to think of the Clippers. That's another team I'm intrigued by. What's your early thought of the Clippers, Jeffrey? Because now that Paul George is gone, their team's completely restructured. What's your early thoughts on them?
I feel like the Clippers, I don't know what the right word is. I mean, their scoring is going to be coming from more places, right? I mean, the ball's going to be spread around more. Like they got more guys that can score, but at the same time, they don't really have like that core, group of guys at the top, right, anymore. Because kind of like with Paul George, where I'm afraid for the 76ers that he's just going to keep declining and then they're not going to be able to win anything with him. Harden's getting worse. Harden can't beat people off the dribble as much as he used to. I mean, he had that one game in the playoffs this year where he had like 35 and he kept hitting all those floaters. People are like, oh, he's breaking people off the dribble. He didn't get to the rim much. He just was driving and he would get to like the 10-foot part, like 10 feet from the rim, and he would like do a floater. I mean, Harden's still capable, but the problem is that, again, he's not as dynamic as he used to be. So it's like they're relying on him. Kawhi Leonard, you can argue he's more injury prone than Paul George. I mean, he's been out a lot.
Yeah, he can't stay healthy. Kawhi can't stay healthy.
I think he's better than Paul George when he's on the floor. He's better, but he's always hurt.
And Jeffrey, that's the one they gave the contract to. Me personally, this might be a hot take, but I would have given it to Paul George before I would have gave it to Kawhi. I'm sorry. I can count on Paul George more at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a hot take, but I can't really, rebuke it. I can't, because even though Kawhi, when he's on the floor, again, he's a better player to me. Not by like a massive amount, but he is. But Paul George is more reliable. So I agree. I mean, that's a hot take, but we'll never know because they decided to keep Leonard and get rid of George, but it's almost like a what if thing, right? Like what if like this season or the next season or whatever, Leonard's out and then you're just scratching your head like George is playing well for the 76ers. You're like, what if they kept him? Like, what would they have done? But I think the team has the potential to be better because they're going to have more scoring options, but I don't know by how much. I mean, a guy like Derek Jones is going to have to step up. For them.
Well, and you've seen Jeffrey, his play in the finals. He played pretty good for the Mavericks. Now, the stats may not reflect that, but he made some timely key plays in the finals. He was playing his defense. I think he earned every bit of penny that he got in free agency from the Clippers. But the question is, will it translate to the Clippers? Because you go from one team to another, sometimes it doesn't always work. The coaching staff is different, whereas Jason Kidd is more player-friendly as Ty Lue maybe, or if like coach doesn't want to be your friend, go out there and play. That's what I take in when I look at those kind of things. That's why I kind of looked at that Derek Jones Jr. signing. I'm like, this is a good pickup for them. Because he plays hard. He leaves everything out there. But in the big scheme of things, he's not going to give you 20, 30 points a night. Every now and then he might get hot from three, and then teams are like, okay, now we got to go guard him. But he's there as your utility guy, defense, rebounding. He'll even pass it. He's there as like your utility guy. And I think that's what he could be the key piece to the Clippers' success, as crazy as that sounds.
Yeah, I mean, and again, he's going to have to be good because they've put their eggs into that basket, instead of keeping George and running it back with the three, the 3-star players. They're now going the route of having Harden and Leonard, and then they're going to have the guys that they've added, to offset losing George to make the team better, because it can happen. It can. I mean, you can get rid of a star player and have a bunch of role players that are better, and your team can be better for it. But like you said, the West is so competitive that I still feel like they're probably going to be like in the 4 to 6 seed range. Like, they'll be fine, they'll be good, but they're not going to be able to compete at the top of the West. I mean, I look at Derrick Jones. I mean, he's kind of like Bobby Portis, even though Bobby Portis is a little better, I think. Like, Bobby Portis is a guy that helps a team that's good, right? Like when Giannis is out, and then it's like, oh, well, the Bucks need Bobby to step up more. I mean, he can kind of do it, but it's like he's better when he's got stars around him, and that's the way Derrick Jones is. He feeds off the energy of others. Like you said, he's an energy guy. I mean, he works his tail off. And I like players like that. I mean, not that the stars don't work hard. Some of them do. I mean, you can tell, like Jokic out there, he's heaving and he's playing 50 minutes, and like when they go to overtime. I mean, there's one game where he plays like 60 minutes, but like sometimes he plays almost all the minutes. Like, some of the stars work really, really hard, but some of them you can kind of tell don't, I guess, or like maybe they don't have to try so hard because they're so good. Whereas, like, some of these guys like Derrick Jones, like, if he didn't play so hard, he probably wouldn't even be in the NBA. That's why he's in the NBA, because of his effort.
Yeah, and I feel like, to put a bow on this, I feel like he's a good fit for the Clippers, because he's hardworking, like you said, and he loves to play. And I think you need a guy like that on your team. You need a Josh Hart type, like the Knicks have. You always need those type guys that may not give you 20, 25 points a night, but you can always count on them to be there and play their hearts out. And speaking of the Knicks loaded up out east as well, making a play for the Celtics, trading for Mikal Bridges, re-signing Anunoby. What do you think of that?
I mean, I'm happy for Anunoby. I mean, he's now like he signed the biggest contract ever for a former Indiana player. I mean, 5 years, $212 million. I mean, I've seen a lot of people say that he's not worth that much, but the thing is Anunoby's one of those players where you see his worth sometimes not show up on the stat sheet. I mean, I watch him play, and there's times where it doesn't even look like he's doing anything. Like, he's just standing there, and he's got like his arms just out, but he's so long. Like, he could just deflect passes and get steals and blocks. I mean, he's a great defender. He wasn't on the all-defensive team this year because he didn't play in enough games to qualify for it, but he probably would have been on the all-defensive team again if he had to qualify for games, because he's that good of a defender. So even though he only averaged like 15 points per game, you saw the Knicks record when they signed him. When he was healthy, there was like a time where I think the Knicks were like 27-5 or something like that after they traded for Anunoby. And when he went down, because you remember in that Pacers series, even though they had those injuries to all those players, the Knicks were still winning. They were still winning the series against the Pacers until Anunoby went down. And when he went down, it was over. And I even said it when it happened, like, Anunoby's gone, it's done. They're not going to beat the Pacers. He is that important of a player because he does a little bit of everything. He's probably like the best role player in the NBA because he's not a star, even though he's getting paid like one now. But he's not really a star, but he's that good because he doesn't have a weakness to his game. He can go off the dribble, he can shoot, he can rebound, he can block, steal, assist, he can do everything. Great shooter. Shoots like 40% from three now. He used to not. He's really good. He's just a good, solid player that can benefit any team. That's why everybody wanted him, and that's why the Knicks had to pay him as much as they did just to keep him.
Here's the thing that's really intriguing to me. Is it just me, Jeffrey, or does it feel like a lot of the teams out east are starting to load up now that a team out east won? Because it seemed like when a team out west won, like all the west teams either stayed put or made little additions. But now that the Celtics have won, it seems like all these teams in the east are starting to load up like, oh, we got a champion over here now. Let's load up again. Do you get that sense? Like, it feels like that to me.
I mean, evidence would say that you're right, because a lot of these teams are like making moves, and they're making significant moves, and it's mostly these Eastern teams. But I don't know why you wouldn't want to, load up per se, even if the Celtics didn't win. Like if the Mavericks, beat the Celtics in the finals, it's like, oh, well, we're just going to sit back and roll it back again and all that. Like, no, I mean, it's like you should want to, get as many good players on your team as possible anyway. So,
well, the reason why I say that, not to cut you off, is because it feels like if someone wins out west, it seems normal, because the West has won a lot here recently. So maybe there's that complacency on the East, like, oh, let's just get to the finals and then let's hope for the best. Now that they've actually got someone who can win, they're like, okay, now let's go take them down. Now that we know there's hope, maybe. That's maybe what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, I get your point, absolutely. I mean, I would say that probably the reason I guess they were slightly complacent is because of the fact that really, I mean, the only team that was like in striking distance for the most part, or that was better than the Celtics for the longest time, was the Bucks. And I guess it's the Celtics, right? I mean, they're like the Cowboys, or whatever in the NFL. Like no one likes them outside of the fans because like they're the Celtics. They have the most titles. Like people don't like the Celtics. Unless you like the Celtics, no one likes the Celtics. So, I mean, they won, and it's like, well, we wanted to dethrone them. Like when the Bucks won, it was like, whatever. But I don't know. It's just, it is a different vibe. I agree. And like with the West, I mean, they haven't dominated recently, and they've had like I've always like in my mind like, oh, the East they're better, but like that hasn't been the case in a while. I mean, the West has been better. They've had more good teams. They've been winning more titles, but East is getting more competitive, though. I mean, you even take a team like the Orlando Magic. We haven't even talked about them. KCP leaving for the Magic. I mean, the Magic were garbage for years. Like, they hadn't been good since, like, Dwight Howard's era. But, like, look at them now. I mean, they got Banchero. They're loading up. I mean, they're getting really dangerous.
Oh, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, I love you like a brother, but you had to bring that up, didn't you? Had to rub it in.
I'm not rubbing it in. I hate it. I wish he stayed with the Nuggets.
But that was going to be my next thing I talked about before we skedaddle. Jeffrey, I kind of figured this day was going to come because KCB is a player who now has 2 titles. Maybe he's at the point in his career now where he wants to go where the money's at. He's done 1 his 2 titles. He's done cemented his legacy in his mind, and he's like, let's go for the money. Let's go play in Florida. No state tax. Not as bad. Take the family out there, and let me go help this younger team. Show them what it's like to be a winner.
Yeah, I mean, as an NBA player, you're making like $20 million a year, and one of the reasons to go to Florida is for the no state tax. Oh man, I would say it's first world problems, but that, I mean, like legitimately though, like for some people that would be, it's big, right? Like having no state tax. Now, obviously, in states where there's no state tax, they usually get you in the other taxes, right? Like they're almost going to make you pay the same. But like when people optically look at it, not having state taxes is better, but maybe the gas tax is higher or whatever, But that's so funny though. It's like legitimately Caldwell Pope, like he's making money now. Like he's always made money, but he's getting a legit contract now. But he cracked me up with that, man. That's funny.
Here's the thing. It breaks my heart to see him go. I really like KCP. I did. did. I still do. I got no problems with him. Go make your money. You got your title with us. Go do it. Love you for it. I'll be rooting for you. But it's just one of those things now. What do we do to get better now? Because I get we had to maybe move on because we still got to pay Michael Porter Jr. We've got to pay Gordon. We've got to pay some of these guys coming up. And I get why you make those moves. You're like, okay, KCP, you're expendable, or maybe we felt like, okay, it's time to move on. Maybe we've got an ace up our sleeve somewhere. You know, there's been talks that we may go out and get Westbrook. There's been talks that we go out and maybe see if we can't get DeMar DeRozan from Chicago, see if we can't lure him over to Denver. I'm just curious what you think we should do with KCP now being gone.
Well, absolutely. To your point, they got to do something because, like, when they lost Bruce Brown, when they had to let him go, and then Jeff Green, I was like, well, I mean, that's fine. Like, I think they'll be all right. But now they're clearly not as good anymore without KCP. Like, you look at the team, and it's like, well, they're not going to be even – like, they're not going to be in the realm of winning a title. Like, we already saw – Jokic being overworked. And I mean, you never want to start talking about age because, like, I feel like I'm like, dang, these players have been in the league for a while now, right? Like, Embiid's 30. Like, when I think of Embiid, I'm like, oh, well, he's one of the younger start. No, he's 30. Like, these guys are not getting any younger. Like, Jokic is younger than Embiid, but, like, he's been in the league now for many years. And, I mean, he's just getting battered, right? Like, year after year, taking hits, playing all the time. Like, that's why, like, Darren or Deron Holmes from Dayton, like he has to be a good pickup. Like I felt that's why when they got Thomas Bryant, I thought Thomas Bryant was going to be good for the Nuggets. I thought he could play 10 to 15 minutes back when he was traded from the Lakers. What happened to Thomas Bryant? I'm not trying to get off on a tangent. What happened to him? Guy played a lot with the Lakers. Remember when Anthony Davis was out? He was scoring like 20, 25 points, playing great basketball. And then Anthony Davis comes back, and then they get rid of him. And then it's like he hasn't even played. Like when he went to the Nuggets, they didn't even play him. I thought he could have been a guy that could have played 15 minutes behind Jokic and gave Jokic more rest. I mean, a backup center doesn't have to be great, but the backup center has to be effective. And the thing is that the Nuggets, they just rely way too heavily on Jokic. I mean, you look at the Mavericks. I mean, they have two centers right now that are basically playing the same amount of minutes. Gafford and Lively basically just evenly split the minutes. Now, I'm not saying that's the way to go. Obviously, Jokic is too good to have somebody else play as many minutes as him. But as Jokic gets older and older, the less he plays, I feel like it's going to make his career longer.
Well, and the thing, too, is Jeffrey, I feel like the Deron Holmes move was a move that we had to make in order to, because when Jokic goes to the bench, we have to win the non-Jokic minutes. That's what killed us in the Timberwolves series. When Jokic went to the bench, it was bad. And I know if RC's still in the chat, he would testify to that. When Jokic went to the bench, Miles Reed ate us alive. It was bad. And Cat went to feasting. It was bad. So we need someone when Jokic goes out, if we're up 10, 15 points, when he comes back in, we're still up, or at least tied. We can't let this get to where when Jokic goes to the bench and then all of a sudden we're down 20. Mm-hmm. You're not going to win very many ball games.
Yeah, and the Timberwolves were a bad matchup anyway for the Nuggets because they had all those bigs. I mean, like there are some teams in the NBA that the Nuggets would have matched up a whole lot better with, like if they only had one like great center, and then Jokic could kind of like even out those times. And then when Jokic goes to the bench, like that team doesn't really have a great bench option either, so it just kind of cancels itself out. But like Jokic did what he could, and outside that one game where he had like a ton of turnovers, like he played really well in that series. It wasn't his fault. But like you said, when he went to the bench, it was game over. I mean, they had no chance Absolutely no chance. And like, how in the world, like, do you expect the Nuggets to beat the Timberwolves when they only have one great center with Jokic, and arguably, I'm not saying they're all three great. Naz Reid's good. I mean, he's a good player, but there's a case that all three of them are great in their own way. I know Cat has a lot of bad games, but like, even when Cat has a bad game, they had Gobert and they had Reid. All of them did something. All of them played well for the most part, outside of Cat having those couple just awful games. But it's like the Nuggets couldn't compete with that. They just couldn't. With the Mavericks, they could a little bit more because they had Gafford and Lively, and both of them could kind of hold down the fort. But yeah, and plus, like, Jamal Murray, I don't know what I don't want to say what his deal was, because I like Murray a lot, but Murray was off this year. I don't know in the playoffs because he had that incident with the towel, and that was just a a rare, I guess you would say. I don't know what word I'm looking for, but it was a rare occurrence for Murray. You don't see him doing things like
a misjudgment.
Right? Yeah, he lost. It was bad, poor judgment from him. Because he's such a cool guy. I like Murray on and off floor. Just weird from him to see that. And then outside the Lakers series, when he hit that mid-range jumper to beat in the Lakers series, like, he played good in that series. He didn't play that good in the other series. I don't know. I mean, he's got to play better too. Like, even like, no matter what they do to add pieces, whether it's any of these free agents, because some would help. They need to make a move. They need to add somebody. I don't know if they can get DeRozan. He'd be great, but I don't know if they can afford it. Maybe they can. But Murray's got to play better again.
Well, and we picked up a couple undrafted free agents out of the draft, of course. Trey Alexander out of Creighton, which I really liked. And I know you've had praise for him. We had a PJ Hall out of Clemson. I really like that pick. We saw what he could do, especially in ACC country, because we watch all the Clemson games because we're ACC people. We've added some undrafted free agents. We drafted Ron Holmes, so maybe we're trying to develop and bring them on, but we need to do something to replace KCP. But there's a couple more things I want to touch on before we go tonight. What do you think about the Thunder trading for Alex Caruso and trading Josh Giddey to Chicago? I think that was a good move for both parties because OKC has now got someone who could shoot the ball a little bit better and is an excellent defender and still got a lot of years left.
Yeah, it's an interesting trade because, to your point, you can look at it that it's good for both. It's good for both players and teams. I hate it because I thought Giddey was going to be with the Thunder for a long time. I like Giddey's game. I mean, he didn't even let like all that off the court stuff really bother him on the floor like some players like would, like regress or whatever on the floor. Like, he didn't, but that much. But yeah, the one weakness he has is he's not a great shooter, but he's a great passer. He's fun to watch. I like him. But clearly the Bulls wanted a ball handler because, I mean, Lonzo, like, him being out is just hurt the Bulls so badly. I mean, he's been out for years. Is he ever coming back? I hate it for Lonzo. But yeah, I mean, I think it's good for the Bulls to get Giddey. I mean, if they lose DeRozan, though, I mean, they're not going to really be contending for anything. It's almost like they're in rebuild mode because they're kind of an average team as is right now. But I mean, it might allow Giddey to like unlock his full potential and be able to I guess you would say, like, be a part maybe of a rebuild. Maybe the Bulls will be good again eventually and he'll be a part of it. But it is kind of interesting because, like, the Thunder have done so well with these draft picks, right? Like, they've drafted all these young guys and they built this team. And then it's like, now they just got rid of Giddey. He was one of those draft picks. He was one of those guys that they took, and like he was playing very well for them. And now they just took an outsider. It was kind of an interesting move because that's not what they've been doing. They've just been drafting guys and accumulating all of this young talent. And it's not like Caruso's like old as dirt or anything, but he wasn't a part of their draft core. Like, he wasn't what they like acquired through the draft. It's just a weird trade. I wasn't expecting it. I didn't think Giddey was going anywhere. I don't think it's a bad move. I mean, Caruso's good. I mean, him being, a more experienced player, I mean, that might help along with Hartenstein. I mean, like, I don't think
that's another
made bad moves. It was just interesting.
Yeah, that's another move that I wanted to mention. The Thunder added more beef because that was one of their biggest critiques. Is Chet Holmgren is not that big of a guy. The Thunder need a little more beef, a little more girth in there. Pause out there for YouTube world, but they needed someone to be a little more muscle bound, and Isaiah Hartenstein can give them that. I think the Thunder upgraded big time. I like what they did. I think the Thunder, they're going to be a team that's going to be around in the West for a long, long time, in my opinion. I don't know if you feel like that or if you feel like they might fall down a little bit. I think they'll be a top 3 team next year.
Yeah, as long as they don't make bad moves, like, that they make a trade for a player that it just doesn't pan. Like, I don't think the Giddey Caruso trade it's not like life or death. Like, their whole future, like whether this works or not. No, I don't think that's like super severe. But like if they do like a big trade and it just bombs, like unless they do that, I think that they're set up well. I mean, again, I was shocked they traded Giddey, but the moves they've made, they've added some, like you said, beef with Hartenstein, and they've more experience. They still have all those draft picks, all these guys. I mean, they were a 1 seed this past year. I mean, obviously they fell in the playoffs, but I just feel that was youth, and the Mavericks were playing very well. So I think they're going to be a problem for years to come. I think they have the potential, as long as they don't blow it or some of these guys don't pan or whatever. Like, if they continue to improve, I feel that this team has the potential to be, in the next 10 years, better than the era of Durant and Westbrook.
And that's saying a lot, too, because that was the peak of the Thunder.
Mm-hmm.
But, last thing, and then I'll let you go, Jeffrey, is Jonas Valanciunas to the Wizards. I'm liking that move. I know the Wizards may not be good for a while, but I'm really liking what they're doing over there in Washington with Kyle Kuzma, Jordan Poole. Now Valanciunas coming in the mix, adding a center, a veteran center, help the young guys. Omnia, their draft picks. I like what the Wizards are building. I think as long as you give them time, I think the Wizards might be a play-in team 2 or 3 years down the road.
Absolutely. I mean, when you stink, when you're one of the worst teams in the league, you can only go up. I mean, like, you can only go up. But you have to make the right moves. I mean, the Thunder were garbage a couple of years ago. Look at them now. It can be done. If they make the right moves, they draft the right players, they're patient with the coaches, all that sort of stuff. They can be good. I believe the Wizards have enough, I guess you would say, building in the right direction where it's plausible. It didn't look like that a couple of years ago. Like the end of the Bradley Beal tenure, it was just looking bad. I mean, like, he wasn't going to fit in their timeline. It's the same thing with Lillard. It's like with the Trailblazers. Like, everybody's like, oh, well, they need to draft all this young talent and build around Lillard. It's like, dude, your time for that's over. If you wanted to do that, you should have done that like 6 years ago. Like Lillard was like 26, 27. Like he's 32, 33, whatever. It's like you can't build around a guy when they're already like getting older and they're going to start declining by the time these draft picks even become good. Doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, like they had to get rid of Beal, and they did. And they've made some good draft picks. They're just far off. I mean, the Pistons, the Wizards, it's going to take 2-3 years, but it can be done. I mean, even the Hornets, like the Hornets are a joke, but they could become good if they would just make good moves. They just don't make good decisions. Like, the thing is that not every team can be good. I mean, like, That's the way it works. You're going to have good teams. You're going to have bad teams. Some teams have to be bad. It's kind of like in college football. Like you got your Ohio States and then you got your Indianas. Maybe that'll be different now with Signetti, but like there's got to be bad teams. There has to be teams at the bottom. Like not every team can go 12-0 in football. Not every team can go, 55-25 in the NBA. Like there's bad teams. There's always going to be bad teams. So the Wizards, the Pistons, the Hornets, these teams, gotta figure it out. And then if they start to win, then new teams will become bad. New teams will be the worst team, and then they're gonna have to figure out. It's how it works. It's a revolving door. Problem is the Wizards and Pistons have been bad for a long time. They haven't done anything, but they both seem to be making positive moves. And like you said, adding veterans, Jonas Valanciunas is a solid player. He's a very, very solid player that will be able to, again, show the young bucks what the NBA is about, what you got to do, how you got to play. And I mean, they've drafted some solid players. Like you said, it's just going to take a couple years, but if they're patient and they make more good moves, they could be good.
Yeah, and another thing is too, it feels like, Jeffrey, we're in an era now, like you said, where there's no patience. I feel like if you give certain teams patience, you would be able to be a whole lot better. I feel like the Wizards, Pistons, like if you look at the talent on the Pistons, not to go too far off the tangent, and all the moves they made, adding Tobias Harris, he was a big pickup. The Pistons have all the talent. They've got Cunningham, Duran, Harris now. They've got all them guys, but they're not patient. Like it takes time for everything to gel. Like, and that's what is frustrating. Like, give this time to gel. Like you make all these free agent moves. Let it gel, let it come together, and you'll get something good. Like, take a page out of Sam Presti's book, make the moves, let it gel, and go.
I mean, it works. Like, you have to make the right moves, and then if you just let it build, you can't just be impatient and be like, oh, it's going to happen this year. It doesn't work that way. I mean, it takes time. But, I mean, the Celtics are so much better than the Pistons, so much better than the Wizards. I mean, you're not going to beat them. Unless they just have an awful game or like half their team's not playing or whatever. I mean, it's just, you're not going to win. It takes time. Like you have to just continue to build. Like, why would you hire Monty Williams, give him a 5-year deal and then fire him after 1 year? It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't. None of it really does. And another thing, Jeffrey, another big trade, DeJounte Murray out of Atlanta. Is New Orleans trying to play contender now? What are the Hawks going to do? Who are they going to get to pair with Trae Young? Those are questions we got to get answered too. I mean, because now you're going to have DeJounte, CJ McCollum. Is Brandon Ingram staying for the long haul? Can Zion stay healthy? Those are questions got to be answered there. Those are some interesting moves as well. Last thing on that, what's your take on that? And then I'll get off the phone here. Or get off the live here.
Yeah, you're good, man. It's been a lot of fun. I mean, having this call-in show tonight and talking to you three, RC Jackson, you. It's been a lot of fun for sure. I mean, I knew it would be. It's just so much going on. But yeah, that's shocking. I mean, like Atlanta. I mean, the thing is that my thing is that the Hawks traded for him. Right? From the Spurs. And it's like, now you're getting rid of him? Like, what? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, you traded for him, and now you're getting rid of him. I don't get that. But the Pelicans, I think that they're kind of in a boat where they're making a lot of moves, and they're not really getting a lot better. I think this move will make them better. But they're kind of just stuck in, like, average to barely above average. So we'll see if this is the trade that finally gets them in the right direction. There's just a lot of competition, man. A lot of competition in the West. It's so tough to win. But I think that I feel like DeJounte Murray will be able to probably help the Pelicans more than the Hawks, because the Hawks are just kind of stuck in even worse than Pelicans mode. I don't really know what you want to say. Mediocrity. I mean, they're just not great. Trae Young is a great player. People give Trae Young a lot of crap for saying that he's no good because it's like, oh, well, he don't win anything. Well, he doesn't have good players. I mean, in his defense, he just doesn't have great players around him outside of Murray. I mean, and now they're getting rid of him. So I don't know.
And the interesting thing is the Hawks went to the conference finals 2 years ago in 2021 when they lost to the Bucks, and then they got beat out by the Celtics last year. But they made the move for DeJounte in the offseason. The previous year before that, a lot of people thought, okay, get Trae Young, a secondary ball handler. Maybe this will be the move that puts him over the edge. But come to find out when you have two ball dominant players, it's kind of hard to make it work. I think that's where the DeJounte Murray experience fell. As Trae Young wanted the ball, he wanted the ball. They both wanted to be the scorer, and it just didn't work out. So maybe now that Trae Young's back on his own again, and they drafted these players, and they've added some pieces, maybe they could revert back to the old Hawks that did make that magical run. Maybe DeJounte can go help New Orleans make a push out west.
Yeah, you made a lot of great points, man. I mean, it kind of, when you said that, it reminded me of, I mean, I haven't watched a lot of the Hawks, to be fair. They weren't on TV too much. But when you said that, it reminded me of Caleb Love, RJ Davis. Same thing. It was the exact same problem because you had two guys that wanted to be the main ball handler. You had two guys that wanted to be the guy, right? So you saw that the Tar Heels were better when Caleb Love was gone. It was RJ's team, and he had the center with Baycott. The team was better than when it was Caleb Love. And obviously, yeah, the two of them made the title game, but that was kind of, I wouldn't say a fluke, but like Caleb Love had a phenomenal run throughout, that year in March Madness. And they didn't replicate it the year after. They just did. Because even in the regular season that year that the Tar Heels went all the way to the championship game, we know that they weren't that good. So it just, they didn't mesh. So, yes, Love went to Arizona. RJ was with Carolina. They both were better teams. Yes, neither of them won it all, but that's neither here nor there. But, yes, I agree. I mean, yeah, Murray and Young probably didn't mesh together very well. But then that begs the question, again, why did they trade for him? It doesn't make sense. I mean, they had to have seen that, right? Like who the type player DeJounte Murray is, and then you trade for him, and then it fails. And Trae Young's still young enough where they can build around him, and he's not old at all. But it's like if they keep, making bad moves, and he's going to get older before you know it, and then they're not going to be able to do anything with it. But yeah, they shouldn't have traded for Murray though, if they just weren't going to fit.
And my thing is with this, Jeffrey, is I think they realized that maybe they thought they were a piece away, and DeJounte was looking to move out of San Antonio. Maybe, and they're like, here, and Trae Young needs some star power to help him out. So they thought maybe they could make it work. But sometimes it doesn't always work, like we've said throughout the night. And that's the biggest key to it. If you, at least they tried it, maybe get Trae Young more of a shooter. Like get someone like maybe if Austin Reeves or someone ever like that ever comes available, go out and get someone like that for a guy like Trae Young.
Because he's a good passer. Like, even though people say Trae Young is turnover prone, which is technically true, he's not, like the most crisp passer in the world, but he can make some incredible passes. And he's not as turnover prone as one would believe. Like, you look at some of even the best passers of all time, their turnover rates can be kind of high because when you pass a lot, you're going to turn the ball over more. It's just the way that it goes. Maybe somebody fumbles your pass or maybe whatever, there's good defenders in the league. They're going to steal it sometimes. So, I mean, Trae Young is not a bad passer. He is a really, really good passer. Can be a guys around that are more, if you give him a couple guys that are more off the ball, like how RJ had Cormac Ryan and Harrison Ingram. If you give him two guys that can knock down the three, pass it to them when they're like going to the rim and they can lay it in. I mean, that would free up a lot of, for Trae Young to be able to get more shots himself, and it would up his assists.
I agree with that. And with all that being said, this has been fun, Jeffrey, but I'm going to put you on the hot seat before I go. Are you ready?
I'm ready, man.
So as we sit tonight, after day 2 of free agency, what's your way too early pick for the finals?
Well, I mean, the East, like you said, has loaded up to try to compete with Boston, but I do believe since the Celtics are basically somehow defying all odds by being able to re-sign everybody and pay them all somehow, the Celtics, I think, are they have to be the pick to make it to the finals from the East because they got everybody coming back. They just won the title. And you can argue that some of the players, like, maybe a Hauser or Pritchard, maybe they'll get even better somehow. Maybe. I mean, Tatum and Brown, I wouldn't say that they're done getting better. I mean, they're still on the younger side. I mean, Brown 25 or 26, whatever, Tatum 25. Like, they're around 25. Like, they're not even – technically, your peak is supposed to be like 27 to like 31-ish. But, maybe they get a little bit better. But, I mean, Horford might get worse as, he's older. But, like, everybody else, I mean, I think it's got to be them. I don't think it's going to be the Sixers. Maybe the Knicks, but they got to stay healthy. Maybe the Bucks, but they got to stay healthy. I would say the Celtics. From the West, though, that's the problem because you've got the Thunder, the Nuggets. Options. I mean, the Thunder, I like their moves, like you said. I mean, they've made some great moves and having some more veteran experience. And, like, if Chet gets better and, SGA is unbelievable. So, like, it could be them. I mean, the Mavericks getting Klay, that's great. Mavericks getting Klay, that's a great move. But their bench is still a little wishy-washy. I mean, they might have to do something. I don't know. And the Nuggets, it's not them right now. Maybe it, like, we don't know what they're going to do. If they can get a DeRozan or something, I would instantly elevate them to either the favorite to win the West or the second best. But as of now, I can't say it's them because they don't have the team for it. T-Wolves, probably not. So I would say Mavericks or Thunder. And as of right now, it's just July 2nd. It was barely the offseason. I would probably lean Thunder.
So, for me, I'm going to say out the West, I'm going to be like you. I'm going to say the Thunder and Mavericks are my two favorites.
Yes,
Dark horse, maybe the T-Wolves. Maybe the T-Wolves are the dark horse. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could throw in like the Clippers if they get it together. I feel like out east, it's Boston, New York, Philly. I would say Boston's probably the favorite, and then like your dark horse, maybe like out east. There's not very many teams I think that'll sneak up on you. Maybe the Pacers again might be a dark horse.
Possible. I mean, definitely. I feel like the gap between Boston and everyone else is still higher in the East than the best team in the West. Like if it's the Thunder, if it ends up being the Mavericks, the gap's not wide. Like the teams at the top in the West are pretty comparable, whereas in the East, it is Boston and everyone else. Yes, the other teams have loaded up, but I still think Boston has an edge, a pretty significant edge over everyone else. I mean, the Bucks, like, at one time, it was the Bucks and the Celtics. Like, they were neck and neck. But the Bucks have fallen. They've got to do some things. And I mean, the Knicks, I like the moves the Knicks have made, but I don't know. I mean, they might have lost a little bit too much. I don't know. I mean, they're good. I mean, they got a good-looking team. And the Sixers, I mean, we've talked about them nonstop. I think they're not good enough. I think they're close, and it looks good on paper, but when it actually is on the floor, I think it's going to be a little bit short of what Sixers fans were hoping for. So I would say Celtics definitely the favorite, and then it's probably the Knicks, and then in the West, it's the Thunder slightly over the Mavericks for me right now.
I would agree with that. I would say the last thing, maybe throw Miami in there with a healthy Jimmy Butler. Because we know how Eric Spoelstra
have to be.
Yeah, they have to be healthy. But as you see, Caleb Martin, he was a big piece to that title.
Khalil
run to
Ware
the finals
drafted.
Like the Heat might be a dark horse, but as of right now, I'm kind of with you. I would go Celtics, Thunder, maybe Celtics, Mavericks after day 2 of free agency. But this is only day 2. There's plenty more moves to be made. But Jeffrey, I appreciate you letting me on. This was fun, getting to talk all free agency. And I enjoyed the live stream. And I know you're tired, so go get you some sleep.
I appreciate it, man. It was a blast having you on. It was a blast having everyone on the show. Appreciate you guys for coming on, all of you, but definitely Austin. It was great having you on, talking free agency, and we'll see what happens. There's gonna be a lot more moves made. I don't know if I'll do another live or not. It depends on like if there's more like just massive news, like DeRozan and some of these other players. We'll see, but definitely be covering probably more free agency. But football's coming back around too. We'll be getting to that, but it's gonna be a lot of fun. But thanks again for coming on, Austin. Great talking to you, man. But we are at the end of our show. We've been live for over 2 hours and 20 minutes. It went longer than I was originally intending to, but it's okay because we had a lot of fun talking about NBA free agency. We basically covered almost everything we could have covered. I don't really think we missed much, but thanks again everybody for showing up in chat tonight and coming on to the show. Had a lot of fun. But if you guys like the stream, subscribe to the channel down below. It definitely helps the channel. We're getting close to 2,700 subs, trying to get to 3,000, but appreciate all your guys' support. Like the stream down below if you enjoyed the show, and also follow me on Rumble and Twitter as well. It helps me over there. But appreciate all you guys for showing up, like Jackson, RC, Austin, and Stephen Cherry as well, and Gixer Squid. All you guys for showing up, really appreciate it. But we'll be back for more coverage on NBA free agency probably in the coming days. More videos, maybe some lives we'll have to see. And football season is going to be coming back. Chris Paul and a few others, but other moves were sneaky as well. But I'm sure there's going to be a few more big moves before it's all said and done. And we'll definitely keep on covering it right here at Only Talk Sports. Thanks for being here, everybody.